Hey, sir, how are you?
Great, thank
Doing
you.
great.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Today is Tuesday, October 15th, and this is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. I've realized that people know not to contact me about Tuesday at 3:30, but they don't know that about Tuesday at 2:30. So starting an hour early, it's put a little kink in my schedule. That's okay. But so we're excited, first off, to have Tara Behunin, that was right? With us from Salt Lake County Emergency Management. And this is a required training that we all go through. And we're excited for you to be here. We know you're going to keep us awake and just super dazzled with your information. So with that, having said that, I'm ready to turn it over to you.
Great. So let me just introduce Tara quickly. I've known you for maybe 10 years now. So Tara worked for the Department of Emergency Management for the state of Utah. She was the Region 2 rep. That's where I first met her when I was voluntold I had this position. So Tara got me through a whole bunch of stuff. Great resource for me personally and for the city. But she's since changed. She is now the emergency manager for all of Salt Lake County. Has been for what, almost a year now? Almost a year now. So brilliant mind, brilliant lady, knows a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. So we were able to get her locked up. This is an ICS 400, Incident Command System 402 training class required for all senior level elected officials. This gets us in the game should we have a big event, right?
Right.
So that's why we're doing this. We've done it in the past a couple of times, but we just needed to get this updated. So we got about 2 hours. Interaction is expected. It will be a long 2 hours if you don't interact with us. So please, when I say us, Tara's going to take it away, and then myself and Riley, when we need to chip in, we will. So Tara, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Very generous words, Chief. Thanks again for your time and being here today. This is really important, and we appreciate, I think, just overall in the emergency management community, when you as senior officials engage in the discussion of how to support and integrate an incident management. So as Chief said, this is the NIMS, if you're familiar with the National Incident Management System, which is again a federally outlined approach to system as to how the government will organize to respond to incidents nationwide. So a couple of terms that we'll go through that you may be familiar with: ICS, or Incident Command System, EOCs, Joint Information Center. So we're going to kind of take it, start from the big overhead with as far as NIMS, and then break it into chunks so that we understand the pieces of NIMS. And if I start going into acronyms, just catch me. I will try to catch myself before. It's just kind of a bad habit. So just as, again, that NIMS provides the consistent foundation across all hazard incident management, really ranging from the daily occurrences to the big responses, such as we've seen with Hurricane Helene and the big fires going on from there. It allows us as responders to coordinate resources, to integrate the tactics, and then to act collaboratively. The state of Utah adopted NIMS in 2004 under Governor Olene Walker at the time, and then Salt Lake County officially adopted it in 2005. And that, as Chief had noted, that allows you to participate in federal grants through FEMA, and ensures that when we've got response coming in to the valley, that we can integrate seamlessly. So I know I want to keep it very engaging and ensure that we keep within the 2 hours, with a potential game scenario to really get things lively on a Tuesday afternoon. So when I say incident, I'm curious what your first thoughts are. What's an incident?
It's an unplanned event.
Perfect. Either natural or man-made, it's an unplanned, versus an event, right? That's planned. That's something we're anticipating. So again, looking at the incident command system, looking at the national incident management system, these are the structure that has been put in place to, again, we know what we're going into, we know how it's organized, and it allows us to take this on and to be efficient and effective. NIMS, in a nutshell, is focusing on collaboration, communication, and coordination. If emergency managers could have tattoos, probably, well, we can, but an EM tattoo, that's what it would be, right? The 3 C's. So what are some recent incidents that you've been aware of that have been within the valley, right? That we can think of that were locally impactful?
The household explosion and holiday.
2020, right? Yeah.
had a constituent whose house burned, caught on fire, and it was quite an incident for Riley's.
Mhm. Yep, absolutely. And so an incident, there's the daily occurrences, right? That the local jurisdiction can handle all on its own. And then there's the ones that definitely expand quickly, or can be a slow roller and expand and then require more resources and more support. I'm forgetting about the PowerPoint. I'm just loving looking at you guys. No, I'm just wanting to have a discussion. So just we'll go through the review of what we've just covered. Of course, we remember the 2020 riots. So within the national response framework, again, this outlines how the government's expectation from locals clear up to the federal government to outline of a response. We say that all incidents start and end locally. So really the preparedness is based off of individuals, private sector, businesses, and as emergency managers, we're always talking about preparedness because we can't get to everyone all at once, right? We need to really champion the spirit of preparedness and resilience at the very base level. So we think of an incident, again, if it's a structure fire, we start there, and do we have significant flooding, how it impacts each level of our communities. And once again, you've got the local government involved, you've got your Cottonwood Heights EOC engaged if it's a localized event. Once your jurisdiction becomes overwhelmed, either through overwhelmed with resources or financially, that's when we hit the next level, which is the county. We can also tag team with the cities regionally, kind of reach across the boundary and look for support in that way. Again, either primarily through resources, through mutual aid. We do that obviously with automatic aid, and then I know the Public Works also has mutual aid in place. Once that overwhelms the county level, we do take it up to the state, requesting assistance there through state divisions, UDOT, sometimes the National Guard has come in. But that's when, from the county EOC, Emergency Operations Center, we reach out, note that we have been overwhelmed and therefore need more support. We also will go regionally as well. The state's broken down into region, and we really focus along the Wasatch Front partners and utilize them to support us. And again, once it becomes a significant event, as we've seen with Utah, it's primarily been flooding. That's where we're getting our federally declared disasters outside of 2020. And that's when FEMA will come in, usually from Region 8. So why at the end of the day is it most important for there to be that localized approach to incident response versus the state just coming in, the feds just coming in right away? What benefits do you see as officials as far as keeping it local?
We know our city, where the most potential hazards will be, where our population lies, our most dense population, where our schools are.
Our infrastructure is laid out.
I think a lot of residents know how the needs of other residents to be able to step in to be able to assist them when something occurs. For example, having someone who's physically, some of the rest of the neighbors knowing that that's a person that needs to get assistance right away first.
Absolutely. Maintains that sense of community, right?
Mhm.
And understanding those needs. So absolutely, it would be challenging to bring in a bunch of people who don't know, right? The challenges, the unique, the critical infrastructure, the culture, right? So maintaining that locally. Okay, I think. Okay, so under the National Incident Management System, there are three major components: the resource management, command and coordination, and communications and information management. Obviously, resource management describes the standard mechanisms to acquire, to procure, to deploy, demobilize. That's right, demobilize. Equipment within an incident. And then command and coordination, this is the component we will really focus on today. That obviously outlines the roles, the responsibilities, the outlines of coordination and command. And then on to communications and information management, which just shows across the board how communications needs to take place in order to ensure an effective and efficient response to an incident. So command, obviously, as it's defined, it's the act of taking charge of directing, ordering. And it is under the chief elected official's authority. And that's naturally outlined within the job of the fire chief, job of the police chief, right? Those are naturally given authorities through the chief elected official of the jurisdiction.
Can I add one quick thing to that?
Yeah.
In our city, Jared is the chief emergency response. Things start and end with him by statute in the city.
I don't start the emergency.
He doesn't, yeah, poor choice of words, although sometimes he could. But basically, we answer to him, right? So Jared is the number one for the city with emergent situations. Does that make sense? Okay.
It's not comforting, but it makes sense. Joking,
We
joking.
might get there, but we never find out.
So some examples of command activities, right, are determining the objectives of the incident, and establishing operational periods. Have you heard of operational periods before? In the period in which, certain operations to meet the objectives will be completed, and then assigning field resources. Okay. And going on to coordination, obviously the exchange of information. And this really takes place within the ICS structure to ensure that, again, everyone has the same sheet of music, so to speak, to ensure that the mission is being accomplished, that the incident is being managed effectively and efficiently, to get back to normal, to bring, the community a sense of reassurance, and get things in place as well to protect economically.
Scary picture, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So
So, and I was wanting to say, a lot of this is, right, this is localized. This is FEMA curriculum localized. So you will see a lot of the county and UFA as to where, I'm working and where I'm coming from, but so you'll see a lot of familiar faces.
So is there situations where, county, state, federal, disasters or incidents or whatever can come in and supersede command then from, if command says that Jared's in charge, can that be bypassed by some type of disaster type of incident?
It's not bypassed. It would only be under a delegation of authority. So if the local said, I want you to now manage this incident.
So let me give you a prime example. If we were to have a large fire in the city, which we won't, because it's not going to reach a tier 1 level unless it starts on our property. A tier 1 fire team you would bring them in, you would say, yes, we want that team to come in and manage it. And then they would assume control of that situation. We would turn over our authority to them to do certain things. You would still have some control left, but that tier 1 team would come in and manage the entire incident.
Okay.
And then give us options, give us information, give us outcomes, right? But for the most part, it stays with us and we work closely with the next level of control, or control is a bad word, collaboration.
Yeah.
We would work it up. Remember this, if it starts local, the responsibility stays local and the control stays local until we abdicate to somebody else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's usually done through a delegation of authority.
That's
So
the key.
we have one by virtue of our job already. So you delegated like fire and EMS to us.
Right.
And so we have the authority up to a certain point to make decisions on behalf of Cottonwood Heights. But once we get to a threshold where we're probably going to start spending money or require more resources or more time or commitment, and we'd probably come to Jared and you and say, hey, this is where we're at. And you could, again, by virtue of the city, by the powers that you hold, grant us additional authority to make those decisions. When it gets really big and complex like that, like if you bring in an outside entity, so if I go run a fire somewhere else in Utah or wherever, I sit down with their governing body and they'll tell me what the kind of their intent is, their wishes. They give me some guidance on how much money we can spend, this, that, and the other. It's literally written out in the delegation of authority. We sign it and then I execute that plan. And then if I have something that comes up that falls outside of the delegation, we reconvene, discuss where we're at, and then you can grant me more authority to spend money. A lot of times what they'll do is put a dollar amount threshold or a certain type of trigger where once we hit that, then we revisit it. But for most of them, they put it fairly high. So we just get it resolved. A lot of those are all done by written delegation of authority.
Yeah, you'll never be bypassed. It'll be, right, a very active discussion.
You see in the movies, you know, Dave come and fight who's over,
Swoop in.
who's in control. Just want to make sure that we still have it.
We've gone to places where they do not want us there, like the whole FEMA example. A lot of times they're pretty grateful to have us there, and a lot of times they prefer to not. So there's definitely times where people stood their ground, said no thanks, and we'll go somewhere else. So
Well, you always have the ability to pull back, to get additional information when things change. You get that opportunity to give further or corrective action, whatever you want to do with the situation.
terminate that delegation of authority. You can stop it, you can do whatever you need to do. So.
All right, another component of NIMS is the multi-agency coordination groups. So we're gonna interchange that between policy groups, so I know you're familiar with that term, and then there's also it's essentially the same thing. Just different outlines, I guess, within the ICS structure based off of the need. So we'll go into this further and a little further down the slide deck, but the multi-agency group, they act as the policy level body, supporting the resource prioritization and allocation. You're making collaborative multi-agency decisions that support the incident. Again, working on the same sheet of music to ensure that you're taking care of the incident, that the needs are being addressed, that the resources and funding are there, that as a policy level group, you're removing the roadblocks to make sure the incident's being managed. So we'll go further into that. For the purpose of our discussion, I'm really going to focus on utilizing policy group because that focuses on what we're doing here today. So you may be familiar with emergency operations centers. We also call ours the emergency coordination center to focus on, again, what we do is coordinate. We are not dictating operational level actions at boots on the ground. And so I know you've got an EOC here.
Ours is an EOC because it's a different mission, right? So ours is an EOC by definition.
And you're welcome to come to the county EOC anytime, ECC anytime for a visit. So again, they can be a physical location. They can also be virtual with the different emergency support functions working virtually and coordinating to, again, in the respective role that they're in, the subject matter expert that they are working to, again, if it's transportation, if it's public works, they're working in their respective role. But it's, again, bringing everyone to the table to perform their certain job role to, again, get things back to normal, to take care of the incident. And
So if, for instance, there is something related to transportation that creates the incident, and it requires, or the city would request, for instance, UDOT to get involved, would UDOT create an EOC just on that incident, or do they have an ongoing EOC that, how does that?
Sure. So either they would come to your EOC or they would operate out of the county EOC. And then they would coordinate the activity with their personnel to handle the problem.
So they wouldn't necessarily have their own.
Correct.
EOC.
Correct. They do have a traffic operations center. They have their own, which they can obviously, that's an example of remotely supporting an incident because they could coordinate something from there. But if we're big enough, right, let's say you've got a road that's completely destroyed, they would either work out of your operations center or the counties to ensure they're locally connected and embedded, right, with the other officials within your jurisdiction to ensure that's being taken care of, you're diverting traffic properly, so forth.
Depends on the scope of the issue, right? Does it affect the region? Does it affect us locally and only us locally? If it's only locally, we bring them in as a resource to us. If it's regional, we become a partner in that shared operation or management of that incident. Does that make sense?
So, for instance, I-215, that's their jurisdiction, that's their baby.
Correct.
But if it affected the residents who live on the south side of I-215, then we would, okay.
If it's only 215 and it shuts down the freeway, we would work closely with UHP, with UDOT to assist them because we have a secondary effect. It's not our road, it's theirs, but we would work closely with them, collaborate with them, provide a resource to them. If it's wholly in the city of Cottonwood Heights, if it's our issue for whatever reason, and we needed them, we would bring them in and they become a resource to us and for us.
Yeah, we'll get into it in a minute, but there's a thing called unified command where then you have the on the ground incident commanders. Directing the incident, it'll have some Colin Heights, UFA, UHP, potentially UDOT. So you'd have this on the ground operational piece going, you'd have the EOC piece going, there's, we'll get into the joke.
We love
all this
unified
stuff in a second, but
Yeah.
yeah, so everyone who has a stake in this has a
Is
say,
piece.
yeah.
And we'll get into an opportunity to really like play a scenario and an incident and kind of,
Give you some exposure.
yeah.
Yeah.
A great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, the great thing about emergency operations centers is that they do bring each partner to the table based off of, again, the incident to handle the situation, to collaborate on messaging, right? On what are we prioritizing? That's the policy group. Like, we need this road open before anything else is done, right? And so that's how vital the emergency operations centers are throughout the valley.
Do we consider our trailer an EOC?
Can be. Remember that an EOC is simply a term. That's where we bring resources together to collaborate, manage a situation. It can be here, it can be mobile. During the flooding of 2010, we set it up in the command post in the parking lot of In-N-Out Burger for days. So it all depends on the situation, the scope of the situation, and the need of the situation. So
You know, what we tend to try not to do is co-locate them. So you have a command post and the EOC,
they're different.
and what will happen is the policymakers and the command people start to do this, and it starts getting a little messy. So a lot of times it's designed like this on purpose to kind of keep the operators over here and the decision makers over here. So they keep doing their job and you all can do your thing and it works out.
Go into that here in just a minute about what those are.
Yeah, there's a little design in that.
Okay. Are you familiar with the term Joint Information Center? Public information officers. So Joint Information Systems, this is run by the Joint Information Center. It's the public information officers, again, coordinating, as we were just talking about those levels. We've got the boots on the ground, we've got incident command as Chief Pilgrim just outlined, then you've got your EOC, and then you've got your policy group up here. On the side is this Joint Information System rolling and continually ensuring that across those levels, we've got the same information. We're sharing the same message. Right, so there's no conflicting message from if firefighter is interviewed and then the mayor or manager is interviewed, and it needs to be the same information. So that's what the Joint Information System outlines. So we did talk about coordination and EOCs, and I just wanted to quickly show what that looks like as far as working with Chief Brenneman from your EOC up into the Salt Lake County EOC and what that looks like. Obviously, as an incident impacts Cottonwood Heights, and that localized response starts first, and then at any point, even if it's just information sharing, right? There's not any resources or exact help needed from the county. We're ensuring that we're touching base and ensuring you've got the support you need, you've got the resources that are needed to take care of that incident. And so I just grabbed other cities just in case. But what that looks like flowing up into the county EOC. Additionally, looking at, again, mutual aid agreements and reaching to our neighbors to see what they may have that may support the incident that is needed. And then what that looks like, and again, I apologize, this is very Salt Lake County focused, but I'm just trying to outline the interconnectivity of NIMS command and coordination. So you can see we've got our policy group up there. Specific to Salt Lake County, we also have an executive committee that just pulls selective subject matter experts based off the incident to come into the policy group and help make those decisions that then flow down into the county EOC and then help drive, again, the tactics on the operational level. So as Chief Pilgrim had noted, right, you can see there's the decision-making, the coordination level, and then the actual tactical level. And each is very, very important. It has their own role and how we support each other in our respective roles and ensuring that we have a very smooth incident response.
Very clear lines on this chart.
Yes.
Yeah, if you go back one slide, it'll show you that Holiday, Sandy and Murray report to Cottonwood Heights.
We don't- That's the last thing we want, trust me.
I'm gonna get some calls tomorrow. Okay, and like I had noted previously, within that, you've got, so the Joint Information Center really tags into the Emergency Operations Center, and that's where that joint information system is continually rolling, so. And again, actually, I'm gonna wait till we go a little further, so. Okay, so we're going to go into, as we have been talking, really specific to the senior officials' roles. So as we noted, the chief appointed official has the responsibility, at the end of the day, they have the responsibility. What that means is just the accountability of the safety of the citizens. And what the chief authority has outlined is that the authority's been given to your respected. This is why we're hiring and bringing on highly qualified individuals. You've got your fire chiefs, your police chiefs, your public work directors, to perform their duties as assigned, that they're ensuring public safety and property preservation and incident stabilization. And so as senior officials, your roles really are specific to providing the policy guidance and helping drive the strategic approach to the incident, which helps the boots on the ground understand how they're going to tactically operate. And obviously using the plan, if you're familiar with your comprehensive emergency management plan, and supporting and facilitating resource coordination and support, again, to on-scene command. A lot of that is done from on-scene command, but as things get more complex, then the need to utilize the senior officials to support those efforts. And then as we had noted, providing the delegation of authority to the respective incident commander or unified command should that take place. Additionally, again, it's ensuring the safety of the citizens within your community, that the government continues, right? We may have a significant event, the government, we still need to function. There's still services that need to take place they find more and more, right? The more you can return the community back to normal, that shows the higher level of success of recovery, and lessens the impacts economically to a jurisdiction. Additionally, the senior officials, it has to come from you as far as a declaration, an emergency declaration of disaster. Have you done that yet in your role?
No, I thought about it once and came close, but decided not to.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, that's a key role of a senior official that has to be taken place, and you know, as far as within the emergency management aspect, as we see that take place, that opens up different opportunities for the state to come in and provide. For instance, there's a flood. If there's a declaration of emergency, that opens up the state disaster restricted recovery account, which we could then send UDOT to help with emergency protective measures, right? So
the situation, our city to the south declared, and it was in advance, there was no issues. They were assuming that they were gonna have issues. So I went to Chief Brenneman and said, should we consider the same? And he said, no. So we
Weigh the advantage of
Right.
doing that versus the disruption it may cause by declaring an emergency, and we chose not to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just for the record, we can tag on to the county's declaration at any point in time and help do this as well. So, but it's a strategic plan that process you put into place and have to sign off on. So, and if we're going to ask the county for help or the state for help, we have to declare. So, and definitely if we want FEMA to come in, they have to have a
right, and
declaration.
I appreciate, you know, Chief, your point it's deciding the pros and cons of, and in one area, it shows that there's a significant situation taking place. It kind of brings a spotlight to it. You won't ever get your hand slapped with like, how dare you declared and it wasn't real, right? But also, does it alarm people? So that is a challenge for as senior officials to really outline, you know, based off of your incident, how you want to pursue that. Additionally, coordinating with other senior officials across the whole community, that's very vital. Again, working with your partners across the boundaries too, depending on how big the incident is as far as support. You know, I can tell you when that last year in August, when that storm cell just sat over Draper and just destroyed their roads. All, you know, the various communication levels across from the mayors, you know, to the councils across that just takes place naturally, right? And I think that's something great within our community is reaching out to see how we can support one another and building those partnerships. Any questions in regards to your role within NIMS and as we go further into ICS? Great discussion so far. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go into the incident command system. So again, this is a component of the command and coordination within NIMS. And this is, I think, something we use pretty regularly, the incident command structure. So what is the incident command system? Again, another standardized approach to command, control, and coordination on incident management. It has a common structure within, and we'll kind of show how flexible and it can shrink and then it can expand based off of the incident need. Due to complexity, I mean, and I'll have both Chief Brenneman and Chief Pilgrim kind of outline their respective experiences with just a daily incident to the bigger size complexity. But the ICS structure also integrates and coordinates with procedures and equipment and facilities and communications. It's just a streamlined, very easily integrated modular organization. That's ICS. And it can easily bring in non-governmental organizations, private sector, everyone tags into this pretty easily. The purposes of ICS are first and foremost to ensure the safety of first responders and others, as well as achieve the tactical objectives, as we had noted, those objectives set forth to, again, handle the incident following the priorities from the policy group and to efficiently use the resources that are assigned and brought into the incident or event. So as we had talked about before, there's incidents and then there's planned events. The great thing about the ICS structure is that it can be used for anything. I've seen people use ICS to plan a wedding. We use ICS to manage a significant, again, a wildfire. We've done it for line of duty deaths. Again, it allows everyone to know what they need to do, how they need to do it, who they report to. It's just a very organized way to handle an event or an incident. So again, across the board, we're going to use it for the Olympics, right? So that's what's great about ICS. So I've already gone into some of the benefits, but it can handle the complexity and the scalability of any incident. It's cost effective because it avoids duplication of efforts. It streamlines you're not wasting resources. You're not wasting, meaning people or equipment. It really plugs in where it's needed. And it provides logistical and administrative support to those operationally running the incident. And again, it easily allows people to come into the organization and kind of plug and play. So when we talk about ICS, here's the basic structure. So we have the incident command, or IC, that's the person calling the shots on scene. And then you have the respective roles or sections between finance, logistics, planning, and operations. So finance is obviously handling the financial and administrative aspects of the scene. Logistics is bringing in the resources that are needed to support the scene. And when I say scene, sorry, I'm kind of simplifying it just to like a fire. But again, we've got the Yellow Lake fire over the hill over there, and it's bringing in all, again, these are expanded modular organizations. So logistics is handling everything that's needed to support taking on that fire. And then planning, have you heard of an incident action plan or event action plan? So that's planning sections taking care of that. Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, just,
okay.
So an incident action plan just basically is a diagram of what the mission is, what the resources are, what the plan is to make that incident or to manage that incident. And then it provides additional resources for that, whether it be stuff like hospital, communications, hospital or EMT, emergency medical services. It could be a wide list. We use it, these guys use it every day. We use it on large scale events. Butlerville Days, we have an incident management plan that we use every year, so.
I think an example of that, when you were fishing Sunday. And the search and rescue people told us we had to stay to the south of the lake. Because the airplanes are coming in and dipping on the north side of the lake. And they went around to each of us in the boats and saying, hey, you know, before you get out there, here's where you're restricted to.
Which is
And-
cool, because those guys are working for the incident, which is way over in Kansas.
Mhm.
So that shows you like these structures can be far and wide. And that's how organized they get, is down to the point where they control the water source. So
Exactly.
there's not a safety issue, so people can still recreate when they're fighting fire way over there, right? So the IC, that's all done through delegation of authority. So that's a good example of all that stuff coming together down to that, literally that.
That's what we thought it was really interesting, that
Yeah.
here we are,
All the way
Strawberry,
down.
and they're saying,
Yeah.
stay to the south.
Yeah.
And they were patrolling it also to make sure, but it was really interesting how that was all. Just see folks coming in and dipping and going.
Yeah, so within this, under operations, you'll have like an aviation branch. Aviation is responsible for securing that water site. So they probably have a person who's over there who manages the dip site. That's their job, is to keep it safe and keep it organized and not have too many aircraft coming in at once. And so there's an entire organizational structure that we fill in with more people as we need to do all those different jobs. And once that job's not required anymore, then we let those people go. We go back to their normal jobs. Yeah, that's what's cool about it. It shrinks and expands.
Big time.
Based off
Scalable.
whatever we need. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the important things about this training, is we can convey that information to residents and citizens that are saying, why are they doing this? Why can't we
Mhm.
go here and say, well, there's a plan,
Right,
you're not part of it, but.
exactly. There's a plan. Right. Yeah, the IEP, the EAP being, again, as I keep thinking about a sheet of music, I do like music for the record, but it outlines what is everyone doing in your respective role during this 24-hour time period. You know, we have folks on their search and rescue team, make sure that you hold the line and no one can fish past this point on Strawberry Reservoir, right?
There's one more piece to add to that. Remember that these incidents, we always like them to be over quickly, right?
Mhm.
They never are on the big scale.
Yeah.
There's going to be a period where we're in that battle rattle. And then we're going to have to demobilize or maintain the incident. This type of structure allows us to pass at the drop of a hat the plan to the next group coming on, and there's no lack or downtime trying to come up with what was the plan, who remembers it, oh, by the way, what was said. We track all of this, and it's simply a change in command, but it's not a change in the plan.
Excellent.
Right. It's really incredible to see these, I mean, these large scale events. I know Chief Pilgrim's been on a handful. I went and visited Yellow Lake last week. And again, they're running, it's a machine, right? Everyone's doing their thing, and especially as that's becoming more complex and taking a lot more land and a lot more resources to handle. This is the structure that's supporting the incident.
There's some type of software platform that they all
Yeah.
adhere to.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things we use, especially with, I can speak specifically to the wildland side. It's a pretty common platform, so we use something called like iSuite, and there's a whole software setup where it literally, from the time you check in, you have to check in, right? That's one of the keys of like ICS. So when I get ordered, it goes in the system, I show up, because if I don't show up, then they know there's something wrong. So like from the second I get a call from dispatch, the time I show up, they're not tracking me, but they're waiting for me. They want me to get there. As soon as I check in that software, it will integrate me into the IAP. And as the plans, people start building the plan for the next day, and operations decide who they want where and all that. Because I checked in with that software, it tracks the day I checked in, the time, and it tracks my duration, right? So I can be there for 14 days. It gives them like a little flag when I'm like running out of time, so they can order a new resource to replace me. So on more sophisticated, large scale incidents, a lot of that stuff is managed by that software. On less sophisticated, It's all like,
It's on a whiteboard.
yeah, I'm like trying to figure it out myself, right? So,
And then you
Yeah.
got track of it all afterwards for reimbursement.
yeah, everything is tracked,
So
everything,
remember.
every
What's
single
that?
thing.
Did we bring up what VOC?
No, we're gonna leave that
From
one.
the shovels out, from the shovels and trash bags,
Noted.
like the fire engines and airplanes,
Right.
every single thing is.
Everything has a
tracked.
value.
Everything is
Every
tracked.
piece of equipment, every hour of time, volunteer, paid. So that kind of stuff has to be tracked if we want to get it reimbursed, so.
And we've talked about this, but operations, they obviously execute the tactical portion of that, so. Oh. I'm forgetting, you guys, I'm not good with the clicker. Not good with the clicker. Okay, so chain of command. As we've noted, the structure of the incident command outlines that there is a very orderly line of communication. Obviously, there's the chain of command, and then there's a unity command, meaning that one individual has one person to talk to. One person to report to, so the information is flowing up and then it's flowing back down. There's not really any like back channeling, right? Because that can really start to confuse the messaging, the communication, the objective, right? You don't want to get anything confused when you're trying to meet the incident objectives. Okay, I am going to turn it over to Chief Pilgrim and Chief Brenneman to really have a chat about incident command and respective. I've never been an incident commander, so I'm gonna let the subject matter experts speak to that.
Want to lead out, Riley? You want me to?
I can take a stab at it and just feel free to
Please do,
jump in.
because let me just tell you this. When I said earlier that these guys are the kings, they do it the best. These guys practice it every day. Law enforcement uses it, but nowhere near the way that they do or have the successes they do with it, so.
Yeah, and for fire service, especially, again, I'll use a lot of my background, wildland, we come up through a very structured qualification-based system. So you work from basically firefighter to incident commander, different levels. So you mentioned like a tier 1 or type 1, that's like your highest level of. They've kind of restructured things, but that was your most complex instance, so thousands of people on scene. Large scale disaster or incident, and then it goes from a type 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, 5 being our everyday stuff we do here. So when our fire engine goes out or the police go out, when they show up on scene, our captain will establish command, take command of everything. That's a type 5 incident basically. So we do those every day, in and out, dozens and dozens of times a day. Basically, every single thing we go on, everything has an incident commander. It doesn't matter if it's just changing the batteries in the smoke detector or a search and rescue call or whatever, we always establish a command. That way, if something does change or something does happen, we have somebody who's in charge and they can begin to or continue to run that incident, request more stuff, ask for more help or whichever. So this incident commander basically kind of calls the shots. They have, like it says here, overall leadership for everything. They're responsible for all the people who are there, all the decision making. They can delegate some of that authority down as the incident gets bigger, but at the end of the day, the incident commander pretty much owns all of it. So you kind of taught us already, but they receive policy direction from the senior officials. So for my examples, I've done this in different cities where I sat down with mayors just like this, and we have the right people in the room, and they kind of ask me a lot of questions, and I'll have a team of people with me, like my plans person, logistics, just a few other people, operations, maybe, just to kind of get a grasp of what's going on. And really, it's your chance to tell us what right looks like at the end of the day. Like when this thing is over, what do you want to look like? As far as like, when will you feel comfortable with us being complete and turning it back over to you? Because we don't want to stay any longer than we need to. A lot of entities are happy to give it to us, but they're pretty excited to get rid of us to take it back and do things that they need to do. So we're kind of in there to just kind of get control of a pretty big chaotic situation to help them go back. But that we received direction from that. So I've done that. I've done it like district rangers and the Forest Service, whichever. We just have a pretty close meeting, just to make sure we understand that we're all on the same page and that we're going down the right direction. The objectives are typically done in conjunction with that meeting. So I understand what you want out of me, then I'll work with you to create long-term objectives. We always plan for public and first responder safety. That's always like our primary objective. We don't want anybody to continue to get hurt. So that's our priority. So a lot of the plans we put in place are based around safety of everybody. And then after that, it's confining it. A lot of times we call it a box. So we do not want the incident to get outside this area or this space or this size or this. We want it to stay where it's at, right? And if it grows, these are our outermost limits. And that helps us kind of create a battle plan, right? So we know what we're working with and what we can do. So the objective is really kind of help confine where we want this to go. We typically will do a written incident action plan on anything that goes like more than a day or two. So if it's just like 1 or 2 days, we don't put a lot down on paper as far as a plan. Most of that's verbal, it's communicated, we discuss it, we brief people on that, but if we don't see it go into 2 or 3 or 4 days, like the flooding is a good example, or it's just gonna be long duration until it's over, we'll typically create a written plan. And then depending on how busy we are, how dynamic the incident is, we'll do a new plan every operational period. So those are set by the IC typically, and it's usually 12 or 24 hours. A lot of wildland operational period is 16. Basically, that's your work cycle. So the fire out there is probably doing 16s. They don't have a large need for night operations. If they do, they'll put just a small amount of resources on nights. When I'm in California, it's like full smash where we're working 24/7 and the cycle is just constantly going. Our work cycles are 24 hours and we're 24 on, 24 off kind of thing. So we set all that stuff up, build the IP based off of that stuff. Again, we mentioned safety, that's huge. So I delegate authority. So if I have an operations chief, other people in there, we can delegate certain decision making to them as well. So when you're the IC, you're actually not, especially on bigger incidents, not actually telling everybody what to do. That's what operations does. So my job is to really work with policy level people, go to a lot of meetings, do a lot of liaison work, make sure that we're addressing kind of all those concerns. And I have an operations person who is managing all the action, right? All this stuff on the ground. And my job is not to get too involved in that, is to help manage and get out, make sure that they can do what they need to do as smoothly as possible. And there's no obstacles there. Then we do a lot of the coordination with the EOC. So the one thing to help understand is the EOC is not really telling us what to do. They're supporting us in what we're doing. So I can call the EOC, be like, hey, I need more fire engines. Like dispatch is tapped, we have nothing. Like, what can you get us? Or like, hey, we just ran this problem with all these animals, or we have this evacuation issue. I need help finding shelters. Like, we're gonna be doing this in the next 6 hours. What can you? So that EOC takes that off my plate. So it's like I don't have to worry about that. I stay in touch with the EOC. They're solving that problem for me, so I can focus on a lot of other stuff that needs to be done right there. So it's really a support piece of the picture. And then we do a lot of the high level briefings. We'll set time aside specifically for this group, right? So you don't have to like come find us. I mean, if you're curious, you can always come find us. We try to be as accessible as possible. But what we like to do is to meet the needs for information and all that. A set time every day that we can meet with policyholders and do agency administration meetings and all that. That way, you know what to expect to talk to me. I free my schedule. Operations people can't get me. No one else gets me except for those people. I show up, I'm committed to that. We can talk, then we go back out and continue doing our thing. And then we do a lot of liaison work. So either I'll do that as an IC, or I have a liaison officer that works underneath incident command, and that person is managing all the relationships. So it's pretty dynamic. What's cool about incident command is I can add pieces as I need to. If it's certain to have multiple safety issues, I put a safety officer in there. If we have huge requests for public information, I don't have time to do that, so I have a PIO set aside who does all that. And so it's awesome that we can like delegate a lot of your responsibilities, but until I delegate them, I own every single one of them. So if you need food, I don't have a logistics guy, and I better start finding food. You're hungry. So my job is to delegate as much of the stuff off as possible, so I can focus on the priority stuff. So
Let me just add to that. I think there's a critical component that kind of got glossed over, and it's the communications piece. The incident commander is communicating up and down, and they're actively involved in that communication piece. And that's where you come into play. When Riley talked about setting time aside during the planning cycle, they will set aside a time to actually do a scheduled briefing. So you're going to know that on this day at 3 p.m., there will be a briefing conducted for you. Now, that can change because something dynamic may happen and we need to brief you before then. Or something may pause that because nothing's happened and we don't want to waste your time. Does that make sense? But the incident commander is a communicator, and then they identify who needs to know what when. So you can trust us that you're going to get the information that is required. Riley said you can come find us. We'll have a little conversation about that later, because the thing I'm gonna ask you to do is not come find
I was
us.
gonna say, it's funny when he said that, the first thought that popped in my mind was the first time we went through this training and Paul kept using the specific example. We don't want the mayor showing up at the incident site and trying to boss people around or anything like that. But I honestly remember you saying, and you kept using the mayor. I don't know why you kept using my name.
There's
Yeah, Brock, so
specific-
pick on
He
you.
has
It wasn't you,
experience.
Sir, it was not you.
I know who it was.
He told me I have to get you all in here and lock you in here when we're.
No, the key is that you have a big responsibility and authority, and we kind of glossed over it before. You answer to people, right? We answer to you, but you answer to your constituents. We want to give you the information so the information can make it out, the right information can make it out, and timeliness of that information makes it out. Because if not, we're gonna have people showing up, we're gonna have you showing up. Our job is to communicate. We're going to do that, so.
But also stay off the mic.
Yeah, there is that too. Communicating on a radio is an art.
Yes.
So anyways. Riley did a good job talking about incident command. The key there is, well, you're gonna talk about unified command, right?
Do you want to go into that right now?
Yeah, let's talk about unified command, because I said earlier, I love
You love it.
unified command. I really do. This is a collaborative effort. When you put up the screenshot that said Cottonwood Heights Incident Command, you had Holiday, there is nothing that's gonna occur in this city of large scale that's not going to affect our sister cities, right? It's going to happen. It will affect the county. It will happen. And so there's that unified command is where we bring together people with an interest, people with a responsibility. So for example, let me give you just a local version of this. When we do Butlerville Days, we have Ann that runs Butlerville Days, right? Her job is to coordinate Butlerville Days. I have a piece of that because the PD has a large interest in security, making things safe for people. Riley's group has an interest in it because they also provide safety, but from a different angle. It's a medical response, it's a fire response, we do fireworks. And so they have a piece of this. And then we have public works. So Matt's group has a piece of this. We come together under a unified command. Within the police department, I play incident commander for the PD mission. Riley's, whoever he designates, plays incident commander for the fire department and their mission. And then Matt designates Alvaro and he plays incident command for public works. Overall, we work closely with Ann to make sure the mission, which is to have a successful, safe Butlerville Days and entertaining Butlerville Days, comes off without a hitch. We're pretty successful at that. But if you take fire, police, public works, we work together in a unified command to make each of our pieces happen. Does that make sense? Expand that out to sister cities. If something is regional, we are going to work with our sister cities in the same way. Each of us would have a piece, but Councilmember Burrell, when she talked about if it occurs on 215, when UDOT has that piece, we are going to come together with UDOT. We're going to come together with highway. We're going to come together with fire. We're going to come together with our local police department to make sure that incident is managed appropriately because we all have a stake in it. So unified command is something I personally like because it gives us resources, different perspectives. So.
Very good, thank you. You maintain the responsibility and accountability of your respective people, right? It's not, public works isn't suddenly directing cops what to do and where to go.
Yeah.
You maintain that lane, right? But again, to Chief's point, it's a shared decision-making. And even for planned events and also for incidents. I also am a big fan of unified command.
So it's based on the premise that there's not one jurisdiction where it happens. So who determines there has to be the top guy who's in charge. Who determines that?
So it doesn't have to be a top guy in
Okay.
charge. Unified command suggests that we have equal ownership in something and we can come together and work together because we have a structure, we have a plan, we have a mission. If it occurs here in the city and it's isolated to us, well, let me just give you an example. Say we have a fire here in the city. It occurs somewhere around Wasatch Boulevard, and it migrates through the upper, Council District 4 and goes onto the hill up on into the Forest Service property. We started that, we own that, but we're going to have to work with fires, the Forest Service with their resources, but it started with us and it ends with us. The responsibility is ours. In that circumstance, fire would work closely with other resources to manage that incident, but it starts with us and it's going to end with us. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so, but I mean, so when you bring all of the stakeholders together and if there's disagreement, is there a key decision maker?
You get to manage the mission for your resources, the city. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Okay,
We're going to work with the other agencies to manage the interests of those issues. Fire does this all the time when they get a fire on the mountain that involves multiple agencies, right? Riley can speak to that, but they work in unison to meet the needs of each of those areas that are affected. Is there one overall incident or manager for that? I'll let Riley speak to that because that's a fire service deal.
Yeah, a lot of times when we run into this, you might run into competing priorities, but we're all adults and we can negotiate, kind of figure out whose priorities can maybe take precedence for that time frame. And then all the emphasis will be put on everyone else's stuff. And so a lot of times it's compromise, negotiation. Sometimes you're at a deadlock and there's like some headbutting going on in there because a lot of us do have competing priorities and we're going to fight for our piece of this, right? But a lot of stuff we can overcome. It starts to become very dysfunctional if you can't just come to some sort of agreement. Got bigger problems on our hands. So a lot of times when that happens, cooler heads prevail. We get sorted out. And a lot of what we do here, we're lucky, is because we're qualified with UFA. We do get that situation where there's a fire in the Forest Service, we don't have to turn it over. And a lot of times where you sign like a CWH with the state of Utah, we delegate the authority to the state of Utah to quote unquote manage that fire, but they just give it right back to us since we're delegates under their authority already. So the nice thing about us is no matter where that fire is at, because our relationship with the Forest Service and whoever else, they just let us manage a lot of that stuff. Now, when we're spending their money, right? So we're going to call in aircraft and helicopters and all that stuff. A lot of times they'll either want their own incident commander or we'll have to sign a delegation of authority where they allow us to keep making those decisions. But we don't have any heartache letting their guy take it, supporting other roles in the incident, right? So if they have a commander they want to put in place, even maybe in this position, I'm more than happy to be that person's operation guy or do whatever they want me to do, right? And that's how it works out. Is the thing that's interesting about this is rank does not matter at all. Should there's no rank per se in ICS. So I could be the chief of whoever, but if I'm only qualified to be an engine boss, that's it, right? I can't be the incident commander. So the one thing where this works really well is that ego usually gets set aside and everyone has a role, responsibility, and a position in a job. So when I show up and the Forest Service wants to be in charge, and I'm like, all right, what can I do to help you out? And it works out really well. But yeah, there's times where definitely there's some conflict and people are just either emotionally invested or it is our jurisdiction. We're super sensitive to that. And we have ways to work around that.
That's the key, jurisdiction, right?
Yeah.
If it's their jurisdiction, we're there to support them, we know our role.
Yeah.
If it's our jurisdiction, then we're going to go ahead and assume that responsibility and we're going to operate under that deal. So unified command works when you have people coming together, pulling in the same direction, and 99.9% of the time, you don't have those conflicts. We understand our roles, we understand the issue. So.
At the state, at the time I was during the pandemic, I worked for the state of Utah and we were in unified command with the State Department of Health and the governor's office, right? With the different aspects of how complex COVID ran in its entire course. And I know at the county level, right, it was the county health director, emergency management director, and the mayor's office. And so again, having that, there can be some tension, but at the end of the day, you are working and identifying those shared objectives under unified command. Shared load can be very beneficial. Okay, so we will reiterate what Chief Brenneman had noted. as far as, the different roles of the senior, we've gone over this a couple times, the senior officials role specific to incident command. And I will reiterate, there is a time and a place to be on scene, and that's after it's been coordinated, right? Versus just showing up. I know we've probably each been on scene. When a senior official shows up and there's really no awareness, it can bring confusion and a little bit of chaos. Obviously want to ensure your safety and well-being. People coming on scene that don't know the hazards of what's taking place that could potentially bring risk to human life. And then there's obviously the media aspect of it that can obviously cause some trouble. So it's a means of ensuring that if you are going to be on scene, make sure that it's communicated prior to welcome you, to make sure that you know where to come, that you're safe, and that you're supporting the scene versus maybe bringing a speed bump to it. Is there any concerns? I would love to know, as far as you're thinking, I want to be there. I've got some constituents to answer to, like, that's a reality. I'm curious.
You just have to understand, you're taking the focus off of what is actually important, which is solving a problem. And you just need to bite the bullet and wait for the proper channels to be communicated. We get it.
We're gonna help you get what you need.
Right.
Both information wise and on scene. We can coordinate that. We just need to work together to make sure that happens, that you fill your needs and the needs of the scene. So we'll make it happen.
I guess I'd rather be involved in the incident center than being in my neighborhood with 75 people telling me to do something.
Why aren't you doing something?
So how do we balance that? I mean, you're telling me you don't want us there, but I don't want to be.
A better place may be the emergency operations center.
So
I've seen it be done several ways, honestly. And I personally believe as I've been incident commander and how effective and competent they are. I've been in Harriman with aircraft coming in, dropping retardant in there, like right there. It's not an issue. And then I've had times where they're getting a little too interested and a little too much, and someone will see that and they'll help them understand there's something else they could be doing, right? And so we had the holiday deal. Mayor Dally and the council member for that district was there the entire time. 0 issues, right? And so every time I'm there, I'm evaluating like every minute, like, all right, are they safe? Right? Just the right place for them to be. It's like, it was very helpful for them and us in that moment. We were literally like getting delegation of authority in that moment from the mayor to do certain things, which would be tricky in different situations, right? And I knew this would be over in 12 hours and they weren't gonna be not very long, right? So I'm like, this is probably a career kind of thing. They're not gonna ever see this again. Like, there's no harm in like this happening, right? And they weren't bothering us. They were part of the solution. Right, the one in Harriman is just a lot going on. They're watching that stuff happen and they want to be involved. They want to know what's going on, and eventually they know they have other things to do as well, and they've removed themselves to go address other needs. But yeah, I'm more open to the environment, right? And if it's not working well, then we address that. If it's working well, and there's something they can do to be helpful, it's not a problem. So
the communications
it really
piece
depends.
that we want to emphasize, right?
Yeah.
It's valuable to you to come out and see the scene because we can sit you in here and tell you through our terms what it looks like, but to have you on scene and see it can be beneficial. We just need to coordinate that and make sure it's the right time, making sure everything's, pulling in the same direction. So
a lot of times what happens is you'll have enough trust in the people who are on the ground where you feel like you don't have to be there. I took over like the Camp Owens fire program after they had like massive fires. And literally the general, the National Guard's like showing up on these fires that are like 30 acres. They're so worried about Camp Owens burning down houses, right? Then after we put out like 10 fires and never saw them again. They didn't call anymore, right? They trusted us enough that they knew we get the job done. And it wasn't things. So that comes to where if you see your responders work, they do a lot of good things. Eventually, like, oh, these guys got it, we're good. They'll call me if there's a problem or I need to be there. And that's usually the world we operate in is, you'll know, I'll reach out to Jared. If I get a gut feel this is gonna be a bigger deal than a couple fire trucks for an hour, then, we'll communicate things, start positioning people and doing that. But that's one thing we want, I hope you have too, is trust in us that they will handle it. And B, will include you in as soon as it's absolutely necessary, put you right in the right spot. So you get a piece of the action, you can see what's going on, but also be safe and not get too drawn in.
I mean, I would see my role as being part of making sure that the community does receive information on a regular basis. Because the rumor mills start when people don't have the information. So just like the good old FedEx example of customer service, you notify even if you say, hey, this is the hourly report, there's been no changes, wanted you to know. You know, we still haven't found your package, but I'm gonna let you know every hour, depending on the urgency of the situation. So I know for me, I have complete trust in the professionals. And in my role, I see it as communicating to the public so that they can, it's like in a crisis, you give everybody a job. Okay, Matt, you go and do this and you do that and keep them from panicking. And so I think that the most we can really do is to communicate in an effective way on a regular basis and manage the expectations of the public.
That's a great point.
That's reminding me, I need to communicate with my wife more because she goes to the mom pickup at the elementary school and there's like 80 moms and they're all asking her about city business. And she's like, my husband doesn't talk to me. So thank you.
Another thing we're careful with is it changes so fast, especially like when we're in the inception phases. And so accurate communication, by the time you get it, it's not accurate anymore. So that's why we're really careful on how much we're sharing and when we're sharing it. And that's why we use our PIOs. That's how we close that gap is we'll have somebody who's on scene that we can communicate with and they know the key players in the city, like your PIO or your point of contact, and they're gonna do all that communication for us. Because we can use the right verbiage, terminology, all that, they can translate that into something that's a common understood message. But we're very careful what we share and how much we share because 10 minutes from them.
Establishing a communication cycle is important. If you know when to expect stuff, we can deliver because we know it's coming. So it's part of our plan to do that type of stuff. So.
One more point of clarity. So you would, there's the EOC, there's the ICS, and you usually try to keep them.
They are. So an EOC becomes a resource center where lots of things are happening. And it's more about coordinating resources in that localized area. The ICS is typically in the field where the incident is occurring. It can be co-located depending on the scale of the event. If it's going to be a large scale, the ELC will be separate from the ICS. So the boys in the, I should say the boys, the staff in the field are going to execute the tactical plan. That's not, the EOC doesn't execute the tactical plan. They provide resources, they take direction, and they communicate mission. Does that make sense?
Sometimes you don't want the IC there because the IC gets in the way.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes you move the IC to a different spot, let the operations people do their thing. So the IC can focus on other stuff, because we all have a tendency to get drawn into like operations. My job, a lot of times is not that, my job is a lot of, so it's, a lot of times we let them go do their thing even. And we're not even close by, so if that helps, a lot of times even the incident commander removes themselves from the situation, because they know my job is interface with you, not go put the fire out, which. This is more fun. This is way more fun. I'd much rather be in this room than.
Is that helpful?
And you can, I would tell you, ask, just ask. Hey, what about this? Can I do this? And we're gonna say, yeah, don't do that. Or, and I'm pretty blunt, right?
Yeah.
I will tell you if I think it's a bad decision.
Yeah,
or
but
a
you're
bad move.
retiring and you're going moving on.
Yeah, but I
You
know
must learn
somebody
that.
else here, so, and I'm not gone yet, but we're getting it. But the point is, when you talk about incident command, NIMS, all of this, this is a structure. It's practice across the country. It's proven. It works, or they wouldn't be doing it, right?
I think to answer your question, so I took Mayor Wilson and Catherine Canner, Deputy Mayor, on like a 3-hour tour of Harley's Fire, because I just want to see what was going on. So I was like, all right, jump in, let's go. And so I just took them around, I showed them everything, took them to camp, like gave them the full on tour, introduced them to incident commander. And they got what they needed, right? Like they wanted to be out there, want to see what was going on. It's a big incident in their area. They didn't know how to integrate themselves because they wanted to just have a better feel for what was happening. So I was like, that's the solution. It's out of the box. It's not like in this class. It's not like And it's like, we can do this. And if you were to show up and you wanted to go see what's going on, you jump in my Tahoe, we'll drive over there. Show exactly what's happening, give you a little bit of frame of reference, and you might understand like, oh, okay, see what's happening here. My spot is definitely over.
So I had a longtime Sergeant John Barker. He used to refer to this as getting your ticket punched. There's gonna be a time when you need to get your ticket punched on scene, and we're gonna facilitate that. You help us understand what your needs are, what your concerns are as far as that, and we're gonna facilitate for you. That's our job to do that.
Yeah, we'll definitely do what we can to help you out, and we'll put you in a spot where you can be most helpful, if that's to your constituents. Or to us, or so you have the knowledge you need. Like, we're definitely do our part. So like, it's not like this black and white or line that you just cannot cross. They will definitely help put you in the most advantageous spot. So you can accomplish what you need to
You
accomplish.
can only hold me accountable for what I actually have direct responsibility for.
Yep.
So what he's like, you go off the side.
So let's talk about that point. You are 100% correct on that. As a policy group, you're responsible for certain things, and it's not the day-to-day operation, it's not the
Right.
tactical execution. It's to give us direction on the mission. And then we're the ones that you hold accountable for making sure we meet your needs, the tactical needs, the end goal. And we're gonna work our tails off to do exactly that. So we're gonna, you know, our job is to do exactly that, right? To make you look good.
We've
let's-
talked about this. I mean,
Yeah.
I've gone through CERT training. I could totally see where like some state president comes in and says, he's in charge. I'm like,
They do.
that is not how it works.
Yeah.
And we will draw a line, like
We
we've,
will.
we've
We're
had
good
to
at
have people not be involved because they just.
You can't.
The thing that's nice is most people, once you have that conversation, they understand it. Some people are still push it. Other people we have to not, they're less fun to work
I
with.
would like to be able to know how to answer to that. is my-
Us, you have us do it.
You, seriously,
Like you tell
you have
us,
a buffer and it's us.
you tell
You
us.
really is. You can always say, you know what? I kicked it to Jared, or I kicked it to Paul, or I kicked it to, Riley.
Yeah.
You
we'll
can
deal with
use that. We'll deal with it. We're good to protect you that way, and that's my job to protect you, is to do exactly
I wanna be
that. So
protected. I want to protect my neighbors and
But,
be able to answer them and take care of them.
100%.
yeah, but we can put ourselves in a position where we can be a little more. I mean, we are
Forceful.
the authority. We have the authority to
Okay.
actually tell them.
I think most of them just want information.
They do.
Right.
and that's
Most of them just want to
communication.
know,
Yeah.
because they want to know for their own family, is there anything that they need to do? And I think our biggest role is providing that information.
100%.
And we,
But volunteerism in the state of Utah, it means everyone wants to do
Yeah.
something. That's gonna be the hardest.
Well, we're really
Big
good at-
Incident is where.
There'll be a time and a place for that.
And I'm gonna tell you,
There'll be a time
I'll
and a
be
place.
honest with you, part of
Which
the
is a
problem
lovely
with
problem to have.
volunteers is they take effort and resources away from the incident.
yeah.
There's a time we need them, but it's not every time. So, but we have to manage that. We're conscious of
Well,
that.
it's funny because we got so many calls day in, day out where people show up and they want to help. And we've gotten really good at like, oh yeah, here's what you can do. Stand over there.
That tree needs to be
That-
held
Go
on.
and get all the granola bars
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the neighborhood,
All right,
because we're
well.
gonna need them to be the
You have a
firefighters.
good way to like distract people, but hey, I know you can do. Then you just
There's a
watch that-
Domino's 1 mile down the road.
Watch that. apartment.
Large.
Anyone get in there.
Yeah, large
Yeah.
2-topping.
Yeah.
So what was unique enough to you about the holiday incident that Rob was okay being basically there the entire?
Man, I knew that was gonna be a political nightmare. So I was like, the more I can front load the mayor, make sure he's comfortable with everything we're, and it was, man. That was some very complex decision making and it's very out of the box. And I think it provided him confidence that we were doing everything we could possibly do to not do what we did. We tried to solve this with every other problem, every other solution under the sun, it wasn't feasible. And I think it gave him confidence that we can count on us to solve,
So what I'm hearing is that was your decision, not his. Is that right?
End of the day, it's his, right?
But
Well,
you gave
part
him
of
the
the issue is-
information to know.
Right.
yeah,
You. So he wasn't gonna look to try this, to try this, to try
No,
this.
we
We
told
kept
him-
him informed the whole time.
we told what our options were.
So,
And we had 2 or 3 options. 2 were very, 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 very hazardous to everybody involved. The third was what we did, which was also extremely hazardous, and he just wanted to know that we had checked all the boxes and considered every other option before we went to the most, what we considered, I don't know, drastic. Which was what we having to do, but a lot of that, it was strategic on our part, because it was like, we're safe, it's not a big deal, this is a huge situation for all this, it's gonna go on for months and months and months, if not longer. So a lot of that was just ensuring that he was confident in what was going down. And it gave him that ability and confidence where it was there, because we've been scrutinized and called out and questioned. And had his support 100% since then. Right, and I support the guys who made that decision, obviously, but I think that helped out too, just knowing that we're in this together. And we're probably gonna take some backlash for this. And we just had the utmost confidence and trust in each other, we supported toward the end. So there's a lot of that in there too, but yeah, it's just a really unique situation that for him to have to deal with that and just all the stuff that I don't even know that they're dealing with from that. Right, I don't want to put him in a bad spot where we made a decision, also he's wondering if we did the right thing.
You recognize that his phone was gonna be running more than yours. So you needed to understand the why.
Yeah. And
Why
that,
did we do it this way? Because he's the one that's gonna answer for it.
absolutely, totally unorthodox, right? Because too, as I know, we don't need you here, you need to be over there, it's 1,000 feet away, but it's like, I just, at the time, I trusted my gut and I had done enough things to be like, all right, this is probably the best thing. And it worked out, I mean, it's by then. That's probably the best option, so.
Best thing about that event, it occurred in Holland.
I like a philosophy.
Didn't say it out loud, but.
But to their point, as you are all engaged in supporting not only what Chief Brenneman and what Lance is doing within emergency management and coordinating that on scene, like you're gonna build the relationships and obviously with what Chief Pilgrim does. To have the conversations, the tough conversations that we'll have to have the answers from the public, right? So I think even just having these conversations now, tagging into what the preparedness and the planning and those efforts are before we have kind of the darker sky incidents, that's gonna pay off, right? Communication is the key.
And that we have a joint message that we distribute to the public. That's why it's important for each of you and us to agree on what's gonna go out, and then we stay unified in that message. So we can't have multiple points.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, it's massive, so.
Good discussion, thank you. And I'll send the deck out, you guys can have this later, but essentially, we've just kind of really gone over the roles of everyone and how we all work together to support the scene. Between the incident commander, what the EOC does, senior officials, and then obviously communication through the joint information system. All right, going into the EOC, again, that's where we collect, share, and then disseminate the information crucial to the incident. That's where a lot of the additional resource requests come in, and through the EOC or the ECC, that's where we can either through regional partners or other contracts or vendors, we can get those additional resources on scene, even if it's, again, different, if it's another logistics officer, if it's another police officer, another fire department, that's where it's all coordinated through the emergency operations center. So just anything that has to do with resource support and coordinating. We're coordinating information, we're coordinating resources. We support public communications, furthering the conversation as far as liaisoning with your partners. And again, supporting what policy and legal have identified as the decision to be made. That's continuing to be supported through the emergency operations centers, that additional level to support boots on the ground right at the incident. So for instance, this is what the emergency coordination and organizational chart looks like for Salt Lake County. It's pretty deep, which is good. We need that depth. And if we had a magnifying glass to get in there, I mean, as Chief Pilgrim had outlined before, within each section, you can go based off of need, right? Do you have a special needs section that you need for special populations that all the efforts there are focused on taking care of that? You've got a search and rescue branch, you've got transportation and debris management. So it's very heavy in taking care of whatever the simple aspect of an incident or the complexity of an incident. We build out those roles. This is not an everyday, right? This is full scale activation. But this is what our org chart looks like. So as we've really had a great discussion overall as far as the senior officials, the policy group within the EOC, that's a great place to come in and watch, be involved in providing direction as we are supporting the scene. And outlining the strategic priorities and then ensuring that the EOC is kind of planning ahead. What resources may we need 12 hours from now, and we need to start working on that to again ensure that the incident on that base level is progressively being handled. So coordination, support, collaboration, and then supporting the communication with both boots on the ground up to the policy group. Furthering into the joint information system. So again, this is the system that's ongoing through our respective roles between the decision-making, the coordination, and then the operational tactical level. We've handled, I think, are we comfortable understanding policy groups and the multi-agency coordination? Okay, I didn't want to overly hit that, but I think we're good. We've had a good discussion.
Did a good job staying out of the weeds, because for me and my professional background, I always think of procurement. Because of emergency SCBAs and emergency FRRs and things like that, that are critical sometimes, because sometimes these incidents occur and there's not enough of everything. And I was just thinking about that as I did see procurement on the slides.
Yeah.
I was thinking that's just one of those elements nobody even thinks about.
Right.
When we have these types of incidents that occur.
So let's go down that path if we can. So if once you declare an emergency here in Cottonwood Heights, does that automatically trigger some emergency procurement processes that you don't, you know what I mean? You don't usually follow it. It kind of changes.
Not that I know.
No? Okay.
But I can go.
Oh, no, I'm just curious, right?
Yeah.
With the county and with the state, it does. It shifts it to where you don't have to, you can kind of go to anyone's on file and just pick them and go.
Yeah.
Just as
Without having to
a,
go to
right.
RFP. process
Exactly,
and everything
just
else.
out of it, just to expedite the need.
Mhm.
And so just thinking about, and if it's not already in place, and maybe it is, chief,
Is it?
what triggers, if you declare what that allows you to do as a jurisdiction?
So right now, the emergency manager doesn't have the authority to spend money. He does. So, and there's levels that he can spend too, and that's under Jared's purview.
Mhm.
We have suppliers here within the city and within the county that we can go to for things, fuel. We can go to, some of the local outlets and purchase food, purchase those kind of issues. One of the things we're working on right now is getting contracts in place with local providers so that we don't have to go in with a credit card and make a purchase. We can go in and already have, just say, look, we're picking up this type of stuff. But that's something we don't have in place as of right now, but we're working towards that end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we should have. It in place.
We should. So
That just makes the process so much quicker.
it does.
Do we have, so when we declare an emergency, is there a way to bypass the procurement rules and regulations we have in place right now?
And so we don't by statute have that, but we do need to work on that and get that in place.
Yeah.
Typically, an entity will say that if an emergency is, a disaster declaration is signed, that the spending limits go above and beyond that. So right now, anything above $3,000, you have to get two competitive. It's not necessarily a bid, but you have to price out from two different vendors, right? So and then 25,000 you have to have, but if we have a big one, 25,000 is going to be going pretty quick. So by statute, and Shane would have to weigh in on this, we can suspend those purchasing requirements. But we need to do that and have those things in place.
Yeah, so right now as a policy group, you would meet, since you don't have that in place.
But you could direct us to
Make that
do
decision,
that,
yeah.
suspend those requirements, and it's perfectly acceptable. It's best practice. But we do need to codify exactly those things.
So a non-disclosure, I need to change in case that happens.
Yeah. Anyways.
Great. So just to finalize, I guess I'll give a quick example. So I did focus at the beginning of this that we're talking policy group, and obviously the authorities and responsibilities that are upon you as the policy group for Cottonwood Heights. A multi-agency coordination group, I'll give you a good example. So when Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast, you had obviously a ton of oil rigs just totally destroyed. And you had each different company had an invested interest in how they were going to recover, clean up, and get back on track. you think about each different agency that had to be at the table with the emergency operations and the incident command as to having their voice at the table, making shared decisions as to resources that were going to support those efforts in cleaning up. So it's kind of a bigger scale, right? And that could change based off of the needs of like whatever takes place here, but primarily what you're going to be involved in as the policy group is kind of as we've discussed, but I wanted to make that familiar to give you the full NIMS experience that we've also discussed the multi-agency coordination group. And this is just a good graphic to show, again, the scale of everything, going from incident command. We talked about unified command, and then it can go to area. Again, that's a broader scope of if it's, again, a bigger jurisdictional area. If there's a lot of jurisdictions or agencies involved, it's kind of incident command, unified, and then area kind of on the command scale. Into the operations center, you see the relationship with the state emergency operations center, the federal aspect. This is just, I wanted to share this as a gee whiz in case you wanted to understand the scale as to local to federal coordination.
Remember, if we have a large scale incident like a 7.0 earthquake in the valley, we're going to be overwhelmed immediately, as will every jurisdiction in the valley. We're all going to come together and fight for stuff, right? Because FEMA will be coming in at some point in time. The state has some resources they'll bring in at a time. Because it's so widespread, we're going to have to compete against these other agencies. And that's when we would go into these types of settings or these types of groups to compete for those resources that we're going to need. So,
and then that lends to the importance of personal preparedness.
there
That's
you
another
go.
soapbox.
And that's, yeah, we can talk about that another day.
Joint information system. Again, this is really coordinated and the management of the Joint Information Center. And that is ran by your public information officer or officers as they are really monitoring, they're gathering, and then they're disseminating common messaging. But again, that's been vetted from at each level, right? Between policy, the EOC at the coordination level, and then boots on the ground. Because we all know the wrong message can really, really hurt. I mean, it can kill a reputation, right? It can just, we don't want another incident within an incident. That's added stress, takes away from the focus really of getting back to normal. So that's the joint information system. Okay, and as we're wrapping up, really the ask is, as senior officials, what are we doing to prepare? And I think step one is where you're at now. I know this is a requirement to fulfill to ensure that you're in compliance, but that you're here and you're having the discussion is such an incredible and beneficial act to show your constituents that you are invested and interested in ensuring that we are preparing, planning to respond and recover as best we can. Some of you may be familiar with your local plans, your comprehensive emergency management plan. We're in the middle of a hazard mitigation plan. So that provides an opportunity to review the risks and hazards within your jurisdiction and how those can impact you based off the capabilities that you do have and the capabilities you do not have. So being involved in the process is crucial.
So let me just tell you this. I value the partnership we have with the county. When I first started this, everybody was doing their own thing, literally their own thing, their own emergency operations plan, their own threat assessment plan, their own this, their own that. Since the county has stepped up about 7 years ago, I think is when Clint first started down this path. They said, why do we have all of these divergent plans? We need to bring them together, and the county is taking the lead in that. They've hired contractors and paid big money to bring in these people to coordinate our efforts. We now become an annex under the county's plan. The county needs assessments. The plan itself is universal to the valley, right? And our interests are now an annex to that. So we have an annex to the county plan. You adopted the SEMP here in May. That was our annex under the county's plan, and it fits seamlessly because you can see that we're not in this alone. We're in it with them. So we're now going under, there's a threat hazard assessment plan that we're doing. It's called THIRA, which means I have to go out and identify the areas of the city that are at risk, the areas of need, the areas where we expect problems. We're also doing an evacuation plan that we're working on that would, should we have a large scale event, how would we evacuate the city? What areas, where would they go? Those types of things. We're still, the next one is gonna be a debris management plan. I don't know if you're aware of this, but when we have debris that's collected either through a flood or through an earthquake, you can't just take it to the dump.
That's right.
We have to manage that. One of the things is we have to stage it somewhere. Is there anywhere in the city where we could stage piles of debris from? There's not. So we have to work with the county to get the, you know, come under the county's umbrella. So we're not alone, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. And the county is taking the lead and we're working closely with them to develop these and to make sure we're up to speed. So.
So in the public works complex, there is not, like you couldn't pile it in there, parking
Ellen, there
lot.
would be, take Brighton High's footprint. And that's the type of debris that you're
Debris you're
talking
talking
about,
about.
that it's small little pieces are good. We had a home that we just cleaned up a yard. You're aware of that. They filled that debris basin and Public Works with just that one house. And if we were to times that by, I don't know, by 1,000 homes or the debris, it could be monumental.
Yeah,
So
we just did that. So in Tennessee, they just cleared just wood. They separated all the debris out. It was 4 miles long,
So it's pictures
30
of
feet tall, and like 25 feet wide, just continuous, just
Line.
wood.
Well, the most remarkable debris recovery that I've ever witnessed was after the hurricanes Irma and Maria that came through the Virgin Islands. And we literally saw like a flat decked, like a freighter, and they were stacking boats that they were collecting not only onshore, but in the, and it was just
debris
breathtaking.
management, it's governed by a whole host of rules.
And you put that perspective on the freeway. It wasn't like in the neighborhood or down, it was down in the middle of the freeway. But nowhere else.
Where else are you gonna put it?
Yeah.
So
That's a plan that we've got to tackle because we're all,
we're on the same boat. There's no land on the east side that would accommodate what we need, and we're required to have a debris management plan. But once again, that's one of the next items we'll be working with the county is that plan.
Now, don't tell Sandy City I said this, but what about Dimple Dell? That's a joke.
I know,
That
I
was
know.
totally, I love
Some
it.
guy like me might be making it.
It's a real deal.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, the windstorm in 2020 alone, right? We found challenges in just removing the trees and putting those in the dump, right? Like even that was, at the time I was at the state, but coordinating between Weaver, Davis, Salt Lake counties where we were gonna put just, and that wasn't a significant event, right? Even in, when they had, was it the Marshall Fire in Boulder that blew through those homes? The debris management plan for that alone was, I mean, anyway, we could get nightmares on this, but it's a plan that it's next to tackle. Right now, we're in the middle of our hazard mitigation plan, and as Chief noticed or mentioned, it's a multi-jurisdictional. So we're taking each city and what are your specific hazards? What are activities we're gonna do to mitigate those hazards? Again, to protect life and property. So being engaged in that process is incredibly valuable. And, you know, continuing with the collaboration, investing in your emergency manager and supporting their training, you know, as we hope to exercise further and get more involvement there. That's it. Again, it's an investment that will pay off in the end. Any questions I want to get to a game here in a minute. Because you didn't think you're gonna play a game on a Tuesday afternoon, but we are.
It's either a game or a test, you decide.
Any,
Game.
are you feeling comfortable as to what the NIMS is, what ICS is? And more importantly, how it impacts you, how you impact it within Conwood Heights?
Yes.
Okay, let's test it. Rock and roll.
We sat down yesterday and we talked about, so this is a game that it's probably been a year. We saw it, well, actually it was last spring, we saw it at the UEMA conference. And I went, I don't know, but the more you look at this, it will spark a conversation. Hopefully so.
So I'm gonna start off the scenario. I'm gonna have to have you add certain aspects.
Okay.
Okay, so it's an extreme snowstorm. So let's pretend it's January 1st, 2025. And we get a significant storm to where heavy snows on the power lines, right? Your public works is overwhelmed because you've got about 8 feet.
8 feet of snow. Okay, we're just gonna, drive south.
Okay,
This is a realistic
so
scenario, right?
what is the main event? That's your first question.
We've had 2 feet of snow in 13 hours. What's the event?
Snowstorm.
Okay,
It is.
now what are the cascading events that can happen based off of the main event?
Traffic,
Down power lines.
trap people who have emergency
Access
needs.
to power needs, food needs.
What's your first, in that scenario, what's our first concern? What is your first concern?
Communication.
Communication, okay? What would your second need be there?
Clearing
First-
streets, I don't know.
Clearing
Clearing
streets.
streets.
Why clearing streets?
Mobility, people's mobility.
How about
Because people
public-
are
how
gonna
about
go,
public
probably.
safety?
Yeah.
People are gonna go regardless.
Public safety.
They will, but how about public safety?
Public safety over
Life safety.
meters.
Life safety, right?
Period. Yeah.
Can we get resources into the area if you've got 2 feet of snow sitting on the roads? We know you can't. We've had storms that are 18 inches that basically lock the city down for a period of time. So what's our first mission? What should be our first mission in that circumstance?
Clear the road.
Emergency.
Clear which roads?
3 feet of snow at Denver.
Arterial.
You've seen that,
Blizzard.
right?
And the immediate was all the cars that were actually got caught, the people
middle of the
caught in the road, could not get anywhere, could not get back to their homes.
Yep.
Because they didn't realize how fast it was coming.
So we have to look at, how do we get stuff into people? It's on those arterials first, right? So we need to clear those and ensure that those roads are open and passable. And then we start looking at the secondaries, right? But what else do we have to be concerned about at that point in time?
Well, emergency response, I mean, just
100%.
because there's a blizzard doesn't mean that someone's not gonna have, heart attack or.
There you go.
Or the stupid people in our cul-de-sac the kids were jumping off the roofs into the 3 feet of snow, cause that was fun.
And then they break a leg
And they break a
or
leg.
compound
Yes.
fracture or
This
something.
happened.
Oh, I know, I do it. I'm like, wait, explain the problem here.
Yeah, you're on your own, but.
What's next? So the hierarchy here is that we want you to think about is what is the priority at that point in time? And it might be that we want people to have, warmth and heat and
So
communication.
utilities.
But we need to, the first thing we always want to be concerned about is life safety.
Yeah.
The first thing we always want to do, and the second thing is not make the situation worse, right? And it's those cars that drive the road that shouldn't drive the road. So how do we overcome those things?
Yeah, they
Is
didn't know.
messaging part of this?
Yeah.
Communication's huge.
100%. We need to get the word out. Stay off the street, stay
Yes.
home. Yes, we know you're without power, but. So.
Which means we didn't get that information to you,
Could be.
because I have no
You
internet.
missed the fact that, and we probably ought to be more proactive with, we know the storm's coming, we probably ought to get the message pushed earlier, and I don't think we do a
Look,
good
you
job
could
of
do
that.
that, but in Denver, they didn't know, and so thousands of people were stuck at the Denver airport without diapers, without formula for
Right.
days.
Mhm.
And my husband was on the road. I'm like, get home. He's like, no, it's gonna go. I'm like, get home. He literally had to walk into our neighborhood because he could not get his car. By the time he got from the Denver airport to me, 30 minutes, he could not get into our cul-de-sac. So when you say, oh yeah, we'll just communicate, you don't know.
But what's the sorry, if I may, well, the communication prior to that, right, is, do you have, I know, this is a kit in your car? Do you have water, blanket, warmers? Do you have food in your car, in your preparedness kit?
Personal preparedness.
Yeah, so.
It is, you,
People don't listen to messaging.
They
can
won't.
Do what they want,
Mhm.
and it comes down to like personal preparedness, because the problem is their emergency becomes our emergency.
That's right.
And it's encouraging
Well-
people to just be prepared and.
and I tell
Make a
people all the
decision.
time when I do these community events, the first thing I tell them, and I've told Lance this,
uh,
I tell people all the time, we ain't coming. We ain't bringing you stuff. If you're not prepared to deal with your own stuff for a period of time, you're in trouble, because I don't have enough stuff to bring you, nor is it my job to bring you immediately. So,
Do you remember when we got the wireless emergency alert? Was it earlier this winter or late of the squall, the snow squall coming?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I mean, so we'll get those, but again, I think especially in Utah, folks will be like,
Remember
I
that
can
text we
drive
got
it.
when a missile was gonna hit Hawaii?
yep. Remember
That
this
was
too, we're
something.
kind of a unique location here between the two canyons. We seem to, intensify any type of snow event in the valley. We get the brunt of it. So maybe what we need to do is be a little more proactive on our end as a city to communicate better with our public. And two, we need to plan a little bit more, maybe city resources that if we see it coming, that we, put our public works and our police or our, on 12-hour shifts or something, because we know it's coming in anticipation. So
Maybe
we
some
can do
early
better.
messaging.
So at what point should have the policy meeting needed to happen with Jared and department heads and myself and any,
Well, so I can tell you, we talk about this stuff routinely. When we anticipate something coming, we have those conversations routinely. We don't want to involve you too soon, but we also need to involve you soon enough so that you're well prepared. If we're going to start delivering a public message, you need to be fronted, not surprised by that. So if we're going to
You should
deliver
be
a public
I mean,
message.
the thing we have working in our favor is we have NOAA, we have an ability to see storms coming. And just as they do in tropical locations where they see the hurricane coming, or I can tell you, working for Snowbird Corporation for 20 years, there were procedures in place. We could see that night we were gonna close down the village and the highway, and you were notified at your desk by a certain time, 2 p.m. You need to get out by 4 p.m. or you'll be sleeping in Snowbird Village tonight.
That's the place.
And there was a procedure in place, and there was at times in the winter, 2,000 employees. So you can put procedures in place, but probably the challenge is you don't want to cry wolf. Oh, in December, we said there was gonna be this big problem. It didn't come to be. You do it again, and then the residents say, oh, yeah. So it is a challenge.
It is,
But
absolutely.
if we really saw something coming, and then how would we reach out? Is it a texting system that would go into every smartphone, or what would it
Thank
be?
you, Councilman Burrell, for mentioning that, because let me make a pitch. How do we communicate with our city in the event of any emergent situation? Let me answer my own question. So there's a program called Reverse 911. Doesn't work. It's ineffective because most homes don't have landlines anymore. And if your phone's not registered with VEC, you're not going to get the message. Number two, we have iPods, which is controlled by the county, but they tightly control iPods. And what that basically is, it's the ability to target cell phone towers in an area. Identify a localized area, draw a circle around it, a rectangle around it, and every cell tower in that area and every cell phone in the scope of those cell towers will get the message. We don't have a mass messaging system. There are products out there, one's Everbridge and other ones, not Rave, what was?
Rave.
Rave.
Mhm.
So these are programs where we can actually blast out text messages that can be received on cell phones. We don't have that capability. It's something the city needs to consider. There is a cost to it. You're talking $20,000-$30,000 probably for a city this size as an initial investment, and probably an ongoing software cost of $4,000 or $5,000 a year to maintain that. I will get more information on that because I would like to push that next year. That's an area we lack the ability to communicate. So I'll push that out. But
And that's not something we can do through VEC as a
no,
coordinating. system?
remember,
It's
Beck can
just-
do reverse 911,
Okay,
but the reverse 911 hits landlines and registered cell phones.
Okay.
So these can be used for anything. You can push a message out about Butlerville Days. You can push it out about a traffic crash. You can push it out about it's Thursday and we want to celebrate Thursday. You have the control over that program to distribute information.
right, well,
So for
We don't
instance,
want to do that,
Right.
but
but you could use it to benefit, right? If you, again, Sundance, so Park City has their public notification group, and they can get updates on Sundance as far as traffic, right? Anything taking place there, and they also know that is an opt-in that they will receive emergency information about. So it's something worth looking into to just assure your community they will be notified when they need to be.
we could have used that a few weeks ago when we had all the huge booms that
Oh,
were rattling our. houses.
100%.
Yep.
So
One thing that you use is because we're the football games over there.
Oh, yeah.
They notify us throughout the events, throughout those 10-12 hours that we're up there. They give us like quarterly updates, like every so hours they push out an update. So we've had this many incidents, this is what's going on. And that's something that we could also use to be able to push out that information to our citizens is what, you know, how things are going and what the status is. So just to give them that basic information too. So.
Go back to communication, that C word, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Let's change and hit another scenario before we wrap up. So now, where does the wildfire start? It's July 4th, and you've gotta start.
Where in this city are we likely to have a wildfire?
Oh, behind my house and
Yep.
my crazy neighbor.
On the hill right across.
It's not public record.
Crestwood Park, east side of Wasatch.
And what are the winds, chief?
Oh, boy.
Enough to push it.
Southwest, they're probably going like 25 miles an hour.
Okay, so our main event, wildfire, what are the cascading events based off of, we've got a
Heavy
wildfire
wind.
taken off.
Heavy wind is
Okay.
very dangerous with fires.
So potential power
Talking
outages.
behind that problem.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay, power outages, how's that gonna affect your communications?
Well,
I was thinking of the residents that are on that southwest side need to be notified immediately.
Right.
Be evacuated.
Mhm.
And how do we do that?
Through the system that we're gonna actually budget for next year.
It's that or what I do is I send
iPods.
cops out, right? Or I do iPods. I send cops out to knock doors. You know, we set up roadblocks, you know, saying, please don't go into the area.
So I keep thinking you're saying iPods, but I don't think that's what you're saying.
iPods.
iPods.
That's fine.
AESE,
Integrated,
not as in
iPods.
pause.
public.
yeah.
If we put a request into the county
Public alerting.
and we need, there's an issue,
Alerts.
would they not do it for us?
They would, but there's a lag time. And they're only gonna use it for, it's gonna be a very specific message. And you're not gonna be able to, we can't use it to do stuff like return home. We can't use it to do stuff like your best exit route's gonna be here. You can't use it for.
It's a one and
your
done
Social.
awareness.
It's.
There's very little follow-up. We can say you're safe to return, but
But that's it.
yeah, it's not go here, you know, it
It's not-
is,
It's
That
not
only
that
lets them know
in-depth.
there's an emergency, but it
Correct.
doesn't say stay in your household.
It would say
we
something.
can,
You're
Oh,
just
yeah.
limited to the amount of characters. that-
but you're gonna get further with door to door.
We're gonna say, you know, public threat, stay in your
Yep.
house.
Yeah.
Or, you know, that type of stuff. It's very limited and they don't like to activate it much.
Can't we
because
send a drone that then drops
Leaflets.
flyers all
like
over
You,
the area?
well, you know what they're doing on the Yellow Lake fire is they have between the DPS helicopter and they have drones with speakers telling the hunters to get out of the area. So, I mean, in remote circumstances, right, they can use drones for messaging. So,
Can we ice cream truck it? I mean, no, literally.
Yeah,
just go down the roads.
We have those,
Your
we have
PA
PA systems
Yeah.
on our vehicles.
Yeah.
We would do that.
Mhm.
We could send them door to door.
Yeah.
So,
We
But-
have, when we've done this in real life, people are typically doing it on their own.
yeah,
And then police is usually going in there, we shut the whole entire road off. We only allow fire people and law enforcement in there. I've seen this happen several times, I mean, fire on the backs of houses and people are, they're fleeing, they're running, they're getting out. A lot of them will evacuate on their own.
Mhm.
But we need to do our due diligence to make sure everybody's gotten out, and that can be tricky and it's extremely dangerous for us as well as them, but yeah, we usually do a door to door. Get out right now kind of thing.
You take their dog first, they will follow.
Oh,
Mhm.
man, I will grab their dog and throw the carport at them.
Yeah,
Literally done it.
yeah.
So thinking about all the people
Yeah.
evacuating, where are you
are we gonna send-
advising to send them?
To a central location, say like the recreation center.
So that is our point. That is our primary. You listen during.
Great minds think alike. Great.
So those receiving centers we can set up. So one of the shortcomings the city has though is we have an agreement with Red Cross to provide sheltering services. If one, the rec center is standing,
Mhm.
or two, the Red Cross is available. Otherwise, we don't have the resources in.
Why don't we
as a
send them
city.
into our schools?
We could, except that's a whole other animal because you have to have agreements in place with the schools to do that. And then you have to have stuff there for them to host a shelter. Number one, we don't want to host a shelter in any way, shape or form. We want people to be self-reliant and they can shelter in place. Or they have somewhere to go that's not dependent on a community type shelter. Community shelter should be a last resort. But we
Since
can't.
we don't have a hospital in
We
Colorado
don't.
Heights, right? So
Yep. So what we would
Schools are
do is.
hard, cause if it's, April, you can't.
Right.
Anywhere between, the school months as far as summertime, we do schools all the time. Usually not for sheltering, but for us, so I can't say command post, but.
Most of our
shelters are usually-
churches would open their doors.
Yes.
And we've got agreements with them that we can do that, but once again, it depends on the severity of the event, the numbers, and what resources we can provide.
So
Churches
we
are not,
we do have arrangements with the various churches throughout Cottonwood
so we
Heights.
have an agreement that we could, we have to go through a process to request it. But the biggest problem with a church is they don't have the facilities, the shower facilities to stand up an actual shelter. It can be a receiving center, it can be a short-term center, hours, not days. Does that make sense? The rec center has facilities to provide for hygiene, as long as it's standing. Schools have that, but it's hard to get the schools to allow us in and disrupt their day-to-day activities. If it's a big event like an earthquake, we'll work with the county to stand up shelters because they have a plan in place. If it's a localized event, it would be more like a receiving center and an information distribution center, because it's probably going to be short-lived. What else do you have on the list? We're just about out of time.
Just considering what critical infrastructure might be impacted, is there any potential impacts to your watershed I mean,
Let me give you a real scenario. A few years ago, we had a fire on the Giverny property. What sits directly below Giverny? Metro Water.
Metro
That
Water.
provides water for how many people in the valley? Almost all of us. Are they here? There we go. There you go. So that can be a consideration. That was a consideration with that fire. But how about stuff like power substations? If we have one that runs, with a local fire substation, or a water treatment facility, or a water storage tank, or, there's all
We have
kinds
a
of
gravel pit
concerns.
where there's a lot of sand and movement and shifting and there's plateaus with houses.
Could have some
and all
issues,
of
right?
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
just thinking of the cascading, right? If the fire takes off, just what other impacts alone from just ensuring people are out of the area. Yeah.
I was assistant commander.
The point we're trying to make with this is it's not just as simple as, hey, we got a fire.
Mhm.
There's all of those cascading events that could occur. But remember, with those events, our number one priority is what?
Safety.
Life, safety, always. And it's not just for the responders, but that needs to be a focus. Because if our responders are at risk, you're not going to provide the service that's expected. Number two, we need to be able to get stuff into those areas, which means our transportation corridors have to be maintained or cleared depending on the circumstances. And then we need to deliver that level of service that's expected, whether it be fire suppression, whether it be emergency medical service, whether it be road clearing. All of those things have to be considered with each of these events. So
And as you think about, as this lingers with you throughout the next couple of days or weeks, think about the investments in making in the future, right? What can we mitigate and take action towards to help ensure that we're responding and recovering a little more quickly based off of the different hazards that are within Cottonwood Heights, and then continue to, again, the training, the discussions, the conversations as we collaborate and can best support Cottonwood Heights. Obviously, Salt Lake County is very invested in all of our efforts and towards emergency management, so.
Just remember that we've had these small events. And we've had even some large events here. And so it's not a matter of, is it gonna happen, it's just when? And how prepared are we going to be?
Awesome.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thanks.
thank you for your
Thank you
time.
for your time.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you all.
No, thank you honestly for coming. This is really important and we've done this a few times now, but it's a good refresher for those that, have been here, and for those that haven't, it's vital information to understand so that we can actually, do what we need to do in case of an emergency. So thank you,
Thank you.
Sarah and Paul.
We took 5-minute break.
Yes, so let's do that. I was actually gonna suggest that. So let's try to be back in just after 5. Okay.
Thank you, Dawn.
Oh, no.
Thanks.
Yeah,
It's not terrible.
I'm ready to go. We're ready, sir.
We're ready, okay. Okay, we're gonna resume our work session. Thanks for having patience and while we had a training with our Salt Lake County Emergency Management team. So item 3 on our agenda is just a review of our business meeting agenda. I'm gonna do that real quickly before we move on to item number 4. So we'll start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. Sean, you okay leading that? Yep. Thank you, sir. Item number 3 is a public hearing to receive input on a proposed budget amendment for the 24-25 fiscal year. That's under a staff report. So Scott's going to talk about that here in just a few minutes, or we won't now. We'll have our city council report, do a citizen comment period, and then we have 2 quarterly reports for this evening, starting with our police. So Chief Russo and Kenny Terry will both be involved in the police report, and then Matt Schiff will be involved in his public works report. We do not have any action items, believe it or not, for this meeting. And so then we'll go over our consent agenda. Okay, so back to the work session. Item number 4 on our work session is we have with us the director for the Salt Lake City Public Utilities, Laura Briefer. Hi, Laura. So why don't you come on up to the table and we'll allow you to do your thing.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor. And it's great to see all of you. I'm Laura Briefer, the Director of Salt Lake City's Public Utilities Department. We are the water provider for a good portion of your city and interface a lot with your constituents, as do you. I did send a presentation over. I don't know if
Yes.
okay. Just to help guide our discussion, but I put together a few topics that I thought would be timely right now, but if there's something else that you would rather spend time talking with me about, I'm also happy to do that. One of the things on my list is to talk about our rates. I'm sure some of you have received questions about what this stabilization fee is on water bills, and I'm here to talk through that and provide you some resources in case you need to point constituents in a direction to, or if you need talking points as well. So just a kind of a refresher about our organization. We are a municipal water provider, so we're different than a water district. Water districts are usually what's called a wholesale water provider. And oftentimes may operate a treatment plant and have a great big conveyance line that then goes to feed other cities. We're actually what's called a retail water provider, and we act a lot like a regional water provider. So we manage the water supplies that serve 365,000 people in the Salt Lake Valley, from the source of the drinking water, which is predominantly from our local Wasatch Mountains, and groundwater, as well as from the Provo River project, that's Deer Creek Reservoir. So we manage from the source. We manage the water treatment of those water supplies, and then we manage the transmission through the large conveyance structures, as well as the distribution all the way to your tap. So we've got a huge responsibility in terms of, for instance, source water protection in the Wasatch Mountains. That's about 190 square miles of land that we actively protect and restore to keep the source of water, our drinking water, clean, to the more complex treatment processes, to a lot of infrastructure. And that water service is not only to Salt Lake City, but as you can see on the map of our designated water service area here, it includes portions of Mill Creek, Holiday, and Cottonwood Heights. And then there's some small little areas of Murray, Midville, and South Salt Lake that's inside of our water distribution system. We're also, for Salt Lake City, within Salt Lake City boundaries, we're also the sanitary sewer provider, where we operate a collection system and a sewer treatment facility that's currently being rebuilt, as well as stormwater and flood control, where we manage for compliance with the federal and state Clean Water Act requirements, as well as flood control. So we think of ourselves often as a one water agency where we're really managing all aspects of water that come through our community. And with compliance with all of the regulations that we are required to comply with from the Safe Drinking Water Act to the Clean Water Act.
You mentioned you're a retail water provider, so Metro Water is a wholesale.
Metro is a wholesale,
Central Utah Water is wholesale, right?
that's correct.
Do you contract with both or one or?
Yes, we actually, so Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake and Sandy was formed in the 1930s by Salt Lake City so that we could have a water district that could access the federal water projects. And that would be the Provo River project, where that water is stored in Deer Creek Reservoir. And the source of that water is primarily the Provo River system, although there's some drops of water from other areas that get in there. And then through Metro, we also receive contract water from the Central Utah Water Conservancy District, and that's the Central Utah project. On a year-over-year basis, it changes each year just based on demand patterns and climate, but the water from the federal water projects, Provo River project water, Deer Creek water constitutes about 30% of the water that we deliver to our whole water service area. And the Central Utah project water is anywhere between 5 and 10%. And the Central Utah project water comes through different plumbings to the Wasatch Front. So
What are the holes in the map? Is that Jordan Conservancy District?
Holiday Water Company is that kind of larger one down south, and then the University of Utah within Salt Lake City, they actually receive water from us, but they are also their own public water system from a regulatory standpoint, and they have a little bit of their own water supply as well.
There are some small little patches of Jordan Valley. Conservancy
Yeah,
District, right?
yeah, they're probably not shown on that map because they're of the scale, but there's a couple of well, one I know of, one small little section of Jordan Valley water where they are retail as well.
The reason I'm asking this is they're actually in our annexation. And
Oh, interesting.
yeah, so
Okay.
there's-
I didn't hear that.
So there's a couple of streets south of Creek Road
Mhm.
that are looking at a possible annexation petition
Oh,
that it sounds like they're currently with Jordan Water.
the Jordan
Okay.
Valley Conservancy District, I think, is trying to get rid of their retail
Oh.
customers.
okay,
And so just kind of thinking who's going to absorb those.
yeah. That's, and we're happy to work with you on that and Jordan Valley as that evolves.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. On to the next slide. So there are kind of 5 main topics I thought we could talk about. Number one is if you're curious about what our water supply outlook, demand, and water conservation looks like. Both over the last water year, we just entered a new water year, October 1st, and what we're looking forward to over the next year. Really important, number 2, are some new federal and state regulations concerning lead service lines. Those are the service lines that go from the main to a home. I always like to make sure you're aware of our water quality consumer confidence reporting. And so there's a little bit of information in there about that as well. One thing that comes up for public utility, Salt Lake City Public Utilities and Cottonwood Heights are coordination opportunities, whether it's development review on projects that are happening or road and water infrastructure coordination. And then I do want to talk about rates and a rate study that we just completed. And then I've included a slide in here that has links and phone numbers to all kinds of key contacts for you. All right, so I have a couple of graphics here. This is the one I pulled off for you here is the drought monitor for the state of Utah. This is the federal drought monitor. And just if you looked at this drought monitor this time last year, it would look completely white. There was no drought. We had a really good snow year the year before. And we also had a good snow year last year, but we had a very warm summer, and that's pushed us into an abnormally dry designation on the drought monitor. That may change depending on what this fall looks like in terms of precipitation. So at the start of the new water year, we're looking quite good with reservoir levels across the state. And actually, I did just spend the rest of today, the earlier part of today at the Utah Water Summit up in Davis County, where we talked with state leaders and others about and hydrologists about this upcoming water year and this last year. So one of the things that they mentioned is that reservoirs statewide are at 72% capacity, which is higher than average. And that's a really good thing for us to be entering into a new water year with that kind of capacity. For us specifically, Deer Creek reservoir is at 71%, which is really great. So our reservoir levels are good on the upside. On the downside, one thing that impacts water supply and runoff is soil moisture. And because of our hot and dry summer, our soil moisture has gone down. And the reason why soil moisture is such a big factor in water resources is just when that runoff comes off the mountains, it gets absorbed into a drier soil matrix. If the soil is not as dry, then that runoff is, we call it, more efficient into our system.
Help us to understand, as a municipality, as a, built out city that we are. We actually have it on our agenda to talk about impervious surface.
Yeah.
So what is the value as council members? What should we be thinking about related to impervious surface policy, in your opinion, to help with what you're saying is a deficient situation per se?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it touches when I talked about thinking like a one water agency, it touches on a number of aspects of water management. So it's true that impervious surfaces can increase the volume of runoff, and it can increase the speed of runoff. And in a built environment, that's not always a very good thing, because that degrades kind of the ability for water from storm events to kind of soak into the ground surface, and could increase chances of localized flooding. It also could lead to additional pollution going to downstream sources, because when water runs off really fast over a built environment, concrete roadways, that kind of thing, it picks up pollutants and then brings those pollutants, probably in your case, eventually to the Jordan River. The Jordan River does not currently meet water quality standards, so it's considered impaired. And I don't know, do you guys have your own MS4 permit for stormwater?
Yeah.
So probably part of that's a discharge permit under the Clean Water Act. And part of that discharge permit is trying to manage water so that you decrease the amount of pollution that goes into those waterways. At some point, there will be a corrective action likely on the Jordan River, and something to require MS4 permit holders and other discharges to the river to even treat water even more. And one of the best ways to treat water is to slow it down and let it, kind of soak into the environment. So wetlands are really important, drainage swales, that kind of thing. One of the things that we're looking at, because we have the same issue in Salt Lake City, is, low impact development strategies with our development community, on-site retention, that kind of thing really can help things slow down. So.
what are those called, the dips or there's a name for that in landscaping, it can be built in.
Drainage swale, yeah,
Swales and such.
yeah, I don't know if you have more to add. on
No, no. I'm
Okay.
just talking out loud.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Or on the question of impervious area. Yeah, so hopefully that answered that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, just over this last water demand was slightly up, maybe about 5% on Salt Lake City system wide over last year, but we had a lot of really good conservation the last couple of years, so it's essentially almost the same as last year, which is a really good thing. And then just finally, we all reside in the Great Salt Lake Basin. The water resources that predominantly provide water to the community are diverted within the Great Salt Lake Basin. And so we watch closely the Great Salt Lake conditions, and currently Great Salt Lake is still quite low. It's at 4192.3 in elevation, and the level in which we'd like to get it up is a few more feet, 4198. So any other questions on water supply demand? Just real quick, I wanted to draw your attention to new federal lead regulations. This is the federal lead and copper rule. That EPA actually just came out with a final revision last week. And basically, the lead and copper rule is in place under the Safe Drinking Water Act to ensure that community water systems test for the presence of lead in water supplies. Lead can be present in a water supply through plumbing. And lead service lines, the lines that go from the water main to the meter and then from the meter to the home. Some lead service lines at one point that were installed are made of lead and pose a higher, potentially higher risk for lead in drinking water. Salt Lake City's service area has not had issues with lead in drinking water, in large part because of the quality of the water. The source water that comes in is not corrosive, and in fact leaves a calcium deposit on the inside of lines, which sort of protects the water from interacting with the lead line. That said, we are required to remove all lead service lines in our service area in the next decade. And the first part of compliance with that is to inventory every single lead service line on our 90,000 plus connections. So what we have to show is whether the public side of the service line, which is the part that goes from the main to the meter, that's the public side, or the private side, which is the homeowners or property owners' responsibility from the meter to the home, whether either part of that service line is made of lead pipe.
Is there a year where those connections would automatically be assumed that they were used the right?
Yeah, in the 1980s. And we've done a lot of paper research, like looking at permits and things like that to figure out what the material of all the service lines in our system are. There's just no data in some areas, but we assume that, I think it's 1987, after 1987, we wouldn't have lead service lines. The new lead and copper rule revision requires us not only to say whether a line is known to have lead, but also to say whether it's known to not be lead. So we just posted our inventory map online this week. And the website is in this presentation. You can type in an address and find out what we know about your lead service line. And then there's also a survey. So if it's not known what your lead service line is, we want to hear from you too. We want to understand what you might know about that line as well.
As community development director, do we know what percentage of households out of the 11,000 or so households in Cottonwood Heights, many of them were built prior to 1987. Do we have a sense of the percentage of households and apartments that were built?
When they were built, we could get that information. I haven't done that analysis though.
And let me double check on the year too. I might be remembering that incorrectly, but we also have a lot of really good information on our website here around the dates and.
And when is this, so this federal program, the lead and copper rule,
Mhm.
how stringent what does it mean to a municipality, this rule? Is this something we're gonna have to inventory and be on top of as a city?
No, the water system has to.
They'll put it on you.
It's my job.
Oh,
Yeah.
my.
So there are a lot of milestones for us to meet, but getting the actual, posting the inventory map online, for instance, the compliance date is today or tomorrow. The compliance date is tomorrow. So we posted a couple days early. So we have a lot of compliance milestones to meet. And we work closely with the state, Utah Department of Environmental Quality. Their Division of Drinking Water is our regulator. They have primacy to regulate community water systems under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So. Also, real quick, if you have questions or your constituents have questions about water quality, they're always welcome to reach out. You and they are always welcome to reach out to us. And it might be important for you to know too that we post the results of our water quality sampling online. This is also something that we do to stay in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. We test for more than 90 contaminants that are required of us under the federal and state laws, and then publish a report once a year to show where we're at on all of those. We are in compliance with all Safe Drinking Water Act requirements, and the water quality report shows that.
Question in regards to water quality, do all districts in Utah, do they have fluoride?
Yeah.
Statewide?
No, I don't think so. So Salt Lake County and Davis County are the only two counties in the state where voters passed an initiative to require fluoridation of community water systems. And so in both of those counties, all water providers have to add fluoride if there's not enough fluoride in the system. The rest of the state where there weren't voter initiatives regarding fluoride, you know, they may or may not have requirements on the books, but so it's really those two counties that have a lot of requirements. And you might be getting questions about that because there was recently a study that called into question whether fluoride at high levels poses risks to the to children's IQ development. And then there was recently a court decision regarding fluoride that directs EPA to better understand the risk under another federal act called the Toxic Substances Control Act. And so it's been in the news lately. We've received a few calls. We're still required to add fluoride to the system. The study actually, the study results indicated that there could be a risk at 1.5 milligrams per kilogram or part per million, and we're required to add up to 0.7, so lower than that risk threshold. And there were some other assumptions in this study that I think the health department is kind of looking and analyzing that to see, you know, what does it really tell us as far as risk. Another emerging contaminant that we have been required to test for recently they're known as forever chemicals. That's PFAS. And we've tested all of our surface water sources and have not found PFAS on surface water sources, which you would I would expect that to be the case given the source protection that we have in place. But we did find PFAS in one groundwater source in a well that serves downtown Salt Lake City. And so we're working on a way to treat that very, very low parts per trillion concentrations. And then I just always want to just say our team is anxious to coordinate with Cottonwood Heights on planned road maintenance and rehabilitation, where we can overlap any planned water line rehabilitation or other infrastructure rehabilitation to reduce impacts to the community. I've recently reorganized my department and created a new division, a development services division. And we're looking at our processes and systems, and please don't be surprised when they reach out to your teams and maybe ask for a meeting so that we can talk about development review coordination and the 14-day and 21-day shot clock and those kinds of things. So we'd love to work in more coordination on that. We've got some other major infrastructure projects going on as part of the big Cottonwood water treatment plant reconstruction. We are working on a large connection between Big Cottonwood and Little Cottonwood. You've probably heard of that project already. That's underway. And then, of course, we have emergency water line repairs that happen on the system, and I know affect some residents in Cottonwood Heights as well. So
I'd like to just interject. I had a constituent that was very concerned about the elderly population along part of the path of where the construction will go.
okay.
And he was concerned that some of these elderly people will likely have to vacate their homes based on their aging process. And it's something he asked what our city was doing to really coordinate with your organization to look out for these homeowners who, let's say, are more vulnerable than for instance, a middle-aged homeowner. And it was fascinating to me, but he said, wow, where I live, it was along Deer Creek.
Okay.
So that might be something that your new team could consider.
Yeah.
Related to outreach timelines to help these elderly.
And you're talking about the Metro project, correct?
Yes,
The
Cottonwood
Cottonwood Canyons Connection project. And this is along the corridor that the concern is,
it of course goes through some residential areas, through yards as well as streets, and
the concern is that
the property values and the ability of these elderly people, should they have to vacate their home in the next couple of years, you know, their ability to sell that home and just it's a mix of both communication and looking out for vulnerable citizens.
I will definitely coordinate with Metro about that. To be clear, that this project doesn't require any vacation of homes. So
right, but the way that it comes over the landscaping,
something.
like it's going to affect people's yard, backyard, front yard, side yards as it comes through.
Okay.
That's
so property impact.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yes, I will coordinate with Metro about that. Thank you. Last but not least, rates and water rates and our rate study. So I'm sure you've received some calls from constituents about water bills this year. We implemented rate changes as part of our fiscal year 24-25 budget, and those rates went into effect July 1st. And so people started getting their bills in August and probably had questions about what is this stabilization fee line item. We really did try to do a lot of public engagement. We sent postcards to everyone on our system and we advertised our budget process, but it did surprise some residents. So the stabilization fee was implemented just this year. It's not anticipated to be implemented in future years, but we had an interesting combination of things occur. One is that we have some major aging infrastructure projects that we are under contract for and have been well underway for the last few years, and they're multi-year projects, large capital We've had increases in operational costs because of regulatory, new regulations and the need to comply with those. So a lot of the costs on our system are fixed and not related to how much water is used. And the structure of our rates, the existing structure prior to this fiscal year, we established in 2018. And it did not, that rate structure did not anticipate the fact that not only would we have so many fixed costs on the system, but that water demand would go down as much as it did. And our revenues are only from what's on your water bill. We don't receive property taxes or other sources of revenues. It's water rates. And so what happened over the last 3 years is that our costs stayed the same. We did have some inflationary impacts as well, and our revenues plummeted in a pretty significant way. And so this year we had to catch up with that, and part of the strategy was to increase the fixed part of the water rate. I wanted to be really transparent in what was going on to the bill, so I called it a stabilization fee. And rather than just fold it into the existing fixed rate. And that's definitely raised some questions about why, what is that for? How is it calculated? And so we do have a lot of really good information, frequently asked questions on our website, but also I'm happy to address questions here or in smaller group meetings if you're getting a lot of residents reaching out to you about this.
So the stabilization fee is separate from a raise in the fixed rate.
Yes.
They're two.
It's a catch-up fee, right?
It's
It
kind
helps
of-
equalize their.
Yeah,
budgets.
and it helps equalize. One of the things with some of our projects that are high cost projects, so for instance, treatment plants, you know, to rehab or replace water treatment plants, they're in the hundreds of millions of dollars. A lot more than if we're just replacing a water line. And we've gone out and obtained revenue bonds in anticipation of doing those major upgrades to treatment plants that were constructed in the 1950s and are nearing the end of their useful life. And so, you know, we have debt, we have increased operational costs and inflation. So yes, it is a catch up. One of the things we've been doing for the last few months is we've embarked in a new water rate study. So we've looked deeply at a new rate design that can account for the conditions we see today better.
And would that replace the stabilization?
Yeah.
fee? Okay.
So, yeah.
With these, our city compared to Salt Lake City, how do we compare as far as infrastructure goes? Obviously, a lot of these costs to upgrades and other things. Are we just as bad as other areas? Are we better? And again, some people, I'll have residents that will say, hey, why are we paying into this fund to pay for this infrastructure
Yeah.
somewhere else? And it's like, well, the other option would be is we have our own water district, which would be very expensive. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to know that the water system isn't based on municipal boundaries. So, I mean, the water system is an interconnected system. So costs and infrastructure that benefit residents of Cottonwood Heights are oftentimes not located within Cottonwood Heights. And so, you know, the Cottonwood Heights residents are benefiting from the operation of the system as a whole, as are Mill Creek and Salt Lake City residents. So.
Kind of interesting, Laura, before the heavy water year we had in 22, I guess it was. We had a lot of people, you know, we were in severe drought in so many places and people were so conscious about conservation, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating that conservation is actually kind of played into the part of
Loss of revenue.
hurting you through revenue.
We have
So-
we have a bad business model.
I had multiple constituents say to me, you know, I barely watered my lawn a year, basically to keep it alive so that it didn't completely die. And then all of a sudden, I feel like I'm being charged for that in the next year. So anyway, we get it. It's, you know, I almost feel like honestly, the state should have stepped in at some point to say, hey, look, you know, the state's stressing conservation as much as anybody. Why aren't they, you know, instead of giving a worthless tax cut that doesn't affect anybody, you know, helping people that needed to be helped in organizations anyway. So we get it, but it's interesting.
So I'll say, one of the things I try to make sure we're clear on is, I don't think it's entirely accurate to say that, I think to say that water conservation caused their rates to go up. Water conservation, reduced water demand is a factor because our revenues went down, but our costs also went up. And inflation was a huge factor in that, especially on larger capital projects. And then regulatory compliance and operations. And so I really want to applaud the amount of conservation, and I want that conservation to continue, even though it means less revenue. That's why the tool of rate design is so important. So that we can say, okay, now we have a new normal in terms of what water demand looks like. How can we make sure to build in affordability at, you know, reasonable rates at efficient water use, for instance, and really like still send the price signals on excessive water use or high water use or inefficient water use, and also have some reliability and stability in the revenue that's coming in to pay all these fixed costs. And so we convened a rate advisory committee, and that included members of our Public Utilities Advisory Committee, who we have 3 members who represent outside of Salt Lake City boundaries, 1 from Cottonwood Heights, and really talked through, you know, what are the alternatives for rate design that accomplishes multiple goals. And so we're going to be finalizing the results of that study. It's taken several months because it's a complicated cost of service analysis and alternatives evaluation. And so we'll be finalizing that study, and I hope to be presenting it to our city council this fall, so either or winter, November, December timeframe. And I'm also happy to come here to talk about it too. It is a fascinating process actually to develop that rate design and meet those objectives. So I'm hopeful that, you know, next year's bills, there will be, I think there will be, the fixed fees will not be at last year's levels. They'll be higher than last year's levels, but I don't think they'll be as high as this year's levels with the stabilization fee that's attached to it. Yes.
Ted Boyer still on your board?
Yes. Yeah. And he is great. He's got a background. He was on the Public Services Commission and had in the past and has this background on rate setting that's come in really handy for us too.
One just plug, I know north of the swimming pool at the rec center, we've got a big water storage area right there with the concrete lid, and there used to be basketball court and some other uses on it. I know that the rec center had some desire to make that some usable space so that it's can actually have some function.
Is this the McKinley Reservoir?
I don't know what it's called. I did have a resident reach out, even though it's not in my area, and they had ideas about it. I just reached out to Ben Hill, and Ben said he's been trying to work with you all.
Okay. Oh,
So
yes.
just a plug to maybe connect with him to figure out if there can be some use for that space. That's all.
Okay, great. Yeah, I've seen some emails from him. So thank you.
And the biggest pushback I've gotten from residents is why Salt Lake City residents pay less than the rest of us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so and you'll see this on the rate study too, and we've done this in previous rate studies, but there is a there is a surcharge on water service that's provided outside of Salt Lake City. And part of the reason for that is that Salt Lake City residents actually pay a Metropolitan Water District property tax for the water infrastructure and supplies that come from the Provo River project. Cottonwood Heights residents do not pay that tax.
Does it even out? Does it, I mean?
Generally,
Is it kind of a
yeah, I mean,
wash in the
it's
end?
kind of hard to compare rates and taxes, but it does generally even out. The other part of this, and this gets into sort of the risk, the cost of risk. So Salt Lake City, as a municipal organization, has taken the entire risk of operating a vast system, whereas the other cities where residents receive water from us do not take on that risk. So we have the risk of the infrastructure, the risk of the regulatory compliance, all of those things the city, Salt Lake City, has taken on. And so there's a risk factor in that calculation as well. And you'll see in the rate study that calculation that gets detailed out for people to see. We did that in the last rate study as well, and I could certainly pass that along to you from the last rate
Yeah,
study.
that would be great, because I think there's some misconceptions and misinformation about why that is.
Yeah. I feel like I've gone way too.
We
long.
probably didn't need to move on, but let me just
Yeah.
ask you, if I could just, before you go, if you were to describe what your conservation policy is.
Mhm.
You just mentioned a model that, look, if people don't use the water system, it hurts you.
Mhm.
But we also know we're in an environment and we live in a place that we need to conserve water. So you just want to penalize, I mean, give high rates to people that use the water, even though you need them to use the water to make your, I mean, tell me what your comfort, the bottom line of
Well,
your conservation policy is.
So water pricing is one element of water conservation policy, and it's an important element that people might get price signals for using more water than they need to on a landscape, for instance. But that's certainly not the whole water conservation policy, and we do have a water conservation master plan that we update every 5 years. That's required in state statute as well. But the Water Conservation Master Plan outlines a whole host of policies, from public engagement and education, which is actually probably the most effective in water conservation, to regulation, for instance, like Salt Lake City passed a regulation around very high water users, and we capped, we won't serve someone that uses more than 200,000 gallons of water per day, which is in of itself very high. But there are a lot of other kinds of policies related to water conservation in addition to pricing. We're not penalizing people for water use. We're trying to encourage them through pricing structures to think about potentially reducing their water. So, if you've got a large property and you've got a lot of landscape, there may be simple ways to reduce your water use, such as addressing inefficient irrigation. And so we want people to think about that and look at that. And I'll say that high rates don't always incentivize that. There's a sensitivity threshold. Like, we've had people on our system who are in the highest tiers of water use. And last year we experimented with a drought surcharge on those high tiers, and it didn't really result in people reducing water in those highest tiers. I think there's just another bill that came in or something, or it wasn't priced high enough. But so pricing is, it's one strategy, but definitely not the whole.
Is it too hard to, because we have good water years, we have great water years, we have bad and awful. And so obviously there's, in a year like this, we're heading into a season where our reservoirs are at 72, they're gonna get probably 30%, they're gonna
Yeah.
get full again.
Mhm.
And yet there are years when it should maybe cost more to use water because we're struggling. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, there's some communities in California have tried variable pricing, I think is what you're talking about. We haven't looked at that part. One thing that you want to also make sure to consider in rate setting is that people can reliably predict what their water rates are. And so if you keep changing it year over year, or the structure year over year, sometimes that's unpredictable to people. But that is something that I know communities are experimenting with. So just to see how that goes.
I have a 30-second question. I'm unclear on out of Desmus Canyon, so we're talking about the Little Willow Stream. Is that watershed protected or is it not?
I think a portion of that is protected, but let me go back and check on that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
got in a conversation with a constituent and they were certain, and they said something about, well, Salt Lake County has it as a watershed, because I checked with a man I know that works with the Salt Lake, and he said, no, it's not a watershed. So it's obviously whether dogs can go up that canyon or not.
Yeah.
And I'd love if you could
I'll
follow
check
up
on
on
that
it later. I'd love to
Yeah.
know.
Laura, thank you. I know we asked some hard questions.
No,
A
you guys
little
are
bit,
great.
you know, but we really appreciate you coming
Yeah.
and giving us the information you gave us was awesome. So
Yeah.
appreciate all that you do.
Yeah,
And
thank
thanks
you
for
so
being a
much.
good partner.
Nice to see
Okay.
you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, item 4 is, or 5 rather, is the Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling District reports. We're gonna have the general manager for Wasatch Front Waste, Pam Roberts, come up and talk to us. Hi, Pam.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it as always. And I do want to give a big shout out to our board member, Matt Holton. He's been stellar in coming in and fresh eyes, taking a look in. And back in June, I presented some financial information. We did have our finance director exit in June, and I want to make sure I give a big shout out to Helen Kurtz, who had joined us in September. So we did some recruitment, exhausted every opportunity, and then Helen reached out to me and I was just praising the heavens. And she joined us September 9th, so welcome her. She's also been coming in and looking at, the numbers that I've put together. And then also we have Zions that we've consulted with for advisory services. But one of the things I wanted to do, and I want to keep this as short as possible, but you may recall I was here in June. Thank you so much, Bree. And, oh, sorry, jumped too soon. I was here in June and I talked about the recycling transparency legislation that's happened. And I went through just briefly on our website. We have the statistics published. What you'll see coming out in a newsletter for November is we have sent a lot of recycling tonnage information for you to publish in your newsletter, which will meet your requirement. The requirement is twice a year. We need to report to you as municipality, and then you need to publish that information that we
I
provide.
think we were the 3rd highest in the district as far as recycled tonnage. Is that correct?
Let me jump into
Remember
that. As far
that? I
as.
mean,
Whoops.
I think that was the case.
Per capita? Is that what you're saying?
Apologies. So, yeah, you have on recycling tonnage, I pulled up this diversion, the environmental stewardship. So for recycling, you have almost 1,600 tons that were collected year to date. So this is up through September. And you have almost 10,000 homes. So this is quite high. Your diversion rate is 21%. I believe last time I was here it was 23. But you have the subscription subscribers for green, glass, that are all included in this diversion rate. But yes, one of your question, to answer your question, yes, you have one of the highest tonnage rates.
So diversion
clean
rate, that includes both the blue can and the green can.
And the little glass can
So just
and the central
20%
site,
of our collections being diverted away from the landfill.
correct, and going for reuse. And then we do have the collection, the central site for glass collection. I want to thank the city for helping us get that agreement started with Whitmore Library. We're just contracting with them directly to have that glass container there. So yeah, thanks for the question. But I do also want to go back, if I may. And I know that in the interest of time, I thought I put this together, jumping right into the finances. I think you understand that we, all the services that we provide for that monthly fee, which is currently $19.50 a month, $58.50 a quarter. We bill on a quarterly basis to try to help our cash balances. we're exploring the thought of billing more often, and how often could we bill? Monthly would be very expensive. It would increase our cash flow. With a quarterly cash flow, when we implement a fee increase January 1, it doesn't hit us until April and May, because we bill in the rears. So Helen and I and our administrative team have been looking at what could we improve and would it help to not have such a high fee increase if we increase the frequency of billing?
What if we
That makes
just
sense.
went to billing in advance instead of in rear?
And that would be great, but one of the things that to consider is that our residents don't like that. They don't want to have to pay for something they don't receive until they actually receive it. And then the other challenge would be our billing system accounts for services that have already been rendered. Could we change that? Those are things that we can certainly explore.
And
So
one
thank
of
you
the
for
things that you run in there is if you paid in advance, and let's say you moved, you have to work on getting rebates and.
Yeah.
That's.
One of the options that we do give our residents and customers is the option to pay up front. So for example, I'll get my annual bill in April and I'll go ahead and pay the whole thing. I shouldn't say annual, I get my first quarter bill in April for January, February, March. But I like to pay up front so I don't have to worry about it. So, but you're right, if I move, then that would have to be refunded to me. An extra administrative cost. So yeah, with weekly garbage recycling, we have the seasonal container reservation program that's also included in that fee that we charge. We have a reduced trailer rental program. Our board is going to look at all kinds of options of should we charge more for that trailer rental, so there's no subsidy from that monthly fee. The board did consider a fee for that scrap, the seasonal container reservation program in the past, and it was not something that the board wanted to do. But in looking at program cost accounting, which will happen on October 21st, next Monday, the board has called a special meeting because they are on schedule and required to tentatively adopt the tentative budget on October 28th. And then it goes up for public comment. And that public hearing will occur on November 18th at 6 p.m. And then at the board's option, they can either adopt the budget. If there's no public comment, they've done that in the past on the November meeting, or they'll wait till the December 16th meeting. But just to go back to fee scenarios that we have presented to the board of staff, I do want to point out the cost increase that we have incurred over this is going to be our 6th year. And one of the things that this chart does not include, this table does not include is the 2025 budget. One thing to note there is that bottom line of total cost increase over 5 years, that jumps from a 5.1 to a 5.8% dollar increase over those years. And that is close to a $6 per home per month increase fee that would need to happen for that. And talking about working with Zions for financial advisory information, we've been in touch with them. Helen, Matt Ferguson, who's our district controller, and I have been working with them and will present information to the board that they provided to us. The nice thing about working with Zions is they came in and they looked at our finances and everything that we had put together for cash balances going forward. And it was nice to be validated that we were pretty spot on with what our thoughts were of how do we sustain the cash and what would that fee increase need to be. The interesting thing about Zions analysis is they look at cash balances year end by number of days that you have available cash. And that's a look that I've never seen before. Our cash balances dropped to, in the first year, even with the fee increase, I believe it was 85 days of cash at year end. And to me, I'm not used to seeing those kind of numbers. I'm used to seeing a little higher cash balance. It does make me a little nervous, and it makes me understand that the timing of when we pay our bills is going to be really critical. And so those are, again, looking at ways of trying to increase that cash coming in to make sure that we can fund, the services. The other thing I want to point out on this illustration of the table is the truck purchase price. It has jumped, $114,000. And that 46,600 actually is for, I apologize, that is actually for the 2025 budget. That is what we have budgeted per truck. This year we paid right around the 425 per side load truck. Understand that even though we have new trucks coming in, and we had 10 arrive already, another one has arrived and we'll pay that bill here shortly. We pay for them for the body up front, or excuse me, the chassis up front. And then once the chassis is built by our vendor Peterbilt, it goes to the body vendor. Once that full truck arrives, we pay that for that body of the truck. And the body is the one that has the arm on it. I know I'm jumping through a lot of information. I just wanted to respect your time while trying to cover everything I possibly could. The fee scenarios that the board is looking at is $550 a month increase starting in 2025, which would take us to $25 a month, 75 a quarter, and then or $650 a month. So again, you can see where that would come. The thought of making our billing frequency sooner or speed that up, what may help our residents to pay the bill and not be so sticker shocked when they get that $75 or plus bill coming in on a quarterly basis. Maybe it's easier for them to manage if it's every other month billing. Again, if we bill monthly, we do know there's about a $600,000 increase cost associated with that. So I have other information, but I wanted to make sure I gave you a speed course in what we're dealing with right now and the need to increase our fees for residents, and then I'll open it up to questions and comments.
The $114,000 increase per truck, over what period of time was that? I can't remember.
That's from
That
2020.
2020.
Yeah, from 2020. So, and then coming into this year, yeah, it's a. One other thing I want to mention is that we have had a need over those years of that you see the increased cost for salary and wages and overtime. One thing to point out is I understand that increase going over the years is much higher than inflationary rates, right, at 8 to 9%. Some of those years it's more like 20% that we increase. We did increase the number of FTEs. We by 10 within this time frame that you're looking at. And then 4 of those were for the equipment operator apprentice program, which because of the CDL driver shortage, we rolled out the apprentice program last August. And what that is.
Problem getting people to
Yes.
go into the field.
Yeah, so we bring people on that are 18 or older, have a valid driver's license, they can pass the DOT, the Department of Transportation physical, and we will pay for their CDL. We pay them hourly wage. It is a lower rate than obviously a normal driver that is out there collecting our waste. And then they move up to a tier 2, and then they move up to an equipment operator wage. But those are 4 positions that needed to happen, 5 really, because we needed a training coordinator as well. So it's good to train people and bring them on to help that loyalty. We did have Lori Turek, who graduated in June, and I thank Councilmember Holton for being at that ceremony. It was awesome during our celebration. And then Jesus just graduated last month, September. Jesus Becerril. So anyway.
Do you pay your apprentices during their apprenticeship?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
It is a lower rate than the equipment operator. The other thing to note is the salary markets, and I think that you've probably experienced this with fire, police, public works, with the CDL driver shortage. We've had to really make sure that we're competitive with our wages. The board just approved a salary market increase that accounted for $130,000 this year, and going into next year, it's about $372,000. That's just the salary market increases. We're also proposing a COLA of 4% and a 2% annual merit increase going forward. So those are big expenses. I recognize that. And I just wanted to make sure I pointed out what's included in that line item of wages and overtime.
Question.
No, you're good. Go
A
ahead.
question I would have is, out of the cities that you service, and they are Cottonwood Heights, what are some of the other cities you serve?
Yeah, so we'll start with this end of the valley. So Immigration Canyon City, which is now a city, Mill Creek City, Murray Holiday, Cottonwood Heights. We have the southeast unincorporated, which will become annexed by either Cottonwood Heights or Sandy City. We have White City, Harriman, Copperton, town of Copperton now. I'm going around the valley, make sure I don't forget anybody. Kearns, Magna, Taylorsville.
So out of those cities that you serve, I'm just curious how many of them go to a every other week pickup for green and blue cans versus all 3 cans being picked up every single week?
Good question. So for one thing to point out with green, that's a total separate fee. And so that weekly service is covered by the fee. We will increase that going into next year by $1.50 per month to $12. So that I would like to keep that separate with the weekly versus bi-weekly recycling. As I've been going out to cities and talking about this, what I'm hearing is that there's no desire for residents or municipalities to change the service level.
So right now you don't have any of these cities
Everyone's
that are
the
doing
same. Everything,
bi-weekly.
yes, thank you.
They're all doing weekly service.
Everybody's
And the
weekly.
board has talked about that and everyone kind of agreed they didn't want to.
I do know that Sandy City has gone to bi-weekly for their, as I understand, for the green and blue. And
Just their recycling, excuse me, just to clarify,
recycling.
their recycling can. I
Didn't you
believe,
say
is-
that the diversion, green and blue are both considered diverting from the landfill? So they're
Correct.
lumped together in yours.
In the diversion rate,
Yeah.
Green's just different because it's only seasonal,
yeah,
which is, it's just a trickier market because you're only doing it for the warm months.
Mhm.
So,
and it's only included for diversion, it won't be included for your recycling transparency report. That's strictly the curbside blue.
And are you still collecting samples from the city once a year? I mean, you're doing a sample study one time a year.
It may be more often to that, and you're talking about sample source where we go through and see how much contamination, how
You
much
take a
garbage is
truck
in the blue.
and that's where you come up with all these. And that's only done once a year with one truck.
No, ma'am, it's done on a quarterly basis, and we look at neighborhoods throughout each city.
So you're examining the levels of contaminated trash within a truck each quarter for each neighborhood. When you say neighborhood, like how many neighborhoods does Cottonwood Heights have?
Oh, many. So I'd say by route is what I mean by neighborhood, but I'd have to get you more statistics, and if we could do an offline, I'd be happy to follow up with that.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, we do have the data, it's just I don't have it right now. But other questions, concerns, anything?
I think
I can
we're
address.
about out of our time consideration, but thank you. We appreciate you coming and updating us, and that's very helpful. So thanks, Pam. So we are gonna move to our staff reports. And I'm looking at our time and not sure how we're gonna get through. We might need to come back as a council after our business meeting. I haven't had to do that in a while, but I'm not sure I really wanna push anything. So let's just see how far we get, and then we'll make a determination of what we need to do there. We'll start with our item A under staff reports, which is a budget adjustment for the 24-25 fiscal year. Scott.
I'll go pretty quick. Excuse me, and if you have any questions, just let me know and I'll slow down. So we typically do adjustments around this time of year. Yeah, excuse me, for our various things that we have that come up. The first two are things that we expected but didn't know the amounts as we went into the budget. The first one is the police UDOT agreement for the canyon patrol, snow equipment and storm monitoring. That's kind of associated with the 3 officers we added about a year ago now. And that's $180,000 to help to offset the current budgeted costs. So that's just revenue that's coming in for that. Item number 2 is an increase in the school resource officer compensation for our cost. So we get now $75,000 times 2 employees that we have out doing school resource officers. We had budgeted at a $40,000 per, so a net of $80,000, so we could add $70,000 of revenue in to offset that
Did
cost.
that change, Scott? I thought that we were looking at 90 per. Conversation.
Yeah, it changed to this 75 and there's an escalator on it. I can't remember. But it goes up 5 or 10,000 a year. And I can't remember the exact
But
amount.
they're not, they didn't start at 90, but they'll get there.
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
it goes up that way.
Okay.
So, yeah. And it matches, it's consistent amongst all the Canyon School District areas that they serve, so. The next item is police marathon overtime associated with the marathon that just finished. That's $7,310 of increased expense and revenue. Next one is police overtime from various local companies when they ask the police for security type services. 1,905 of added expense and revenue. Police DUI and other state of Utah Division of Public Safety reimbursed overtime. Oh, I didn't add it there, but anyhow, it's $21,116. A lot of it is DUI overtime shifts. It could also be some crosswalk and some click it or ticket type stuff that they do as well. Excuse me. We were required to do a rabies test for a holiday court case. Probably somebody got bit by a dog and we needed to pay for a test that went with that. On that one. A police canine contribution from the Kara Clapp Foundation for $12,000. This has been talked about before. Again, an increase in expense and revenue for that.
Real quick, Scott, sorry, wouldn't we bill the dog owner for that to bid somebody to?
It gets billed to the dog owner through and recouped through court restitution costs, so that will
We
come
don't
through
need-
as a revenue offset
Okay,
to
okay.
the municipal court. So yeah, it just isn't a direct matchup on that, so yeah.
Okay.
Number 8, a police canine contribution from the Timothy Blair family for $100, excuse me, to go to canine type expenditures. And then this one is a historic committee grant from the state of Utah for the survey of historical properties, and that's $5,000 of increased expense and revenue. And then we did get from the EDCU a grant for economic development for $500, and so that's an increase in expense and revenue for $500. And then there was a Brighton Ute football scholarship program for $2,000. So the net of all this is an addition of $50,111 of expense and just under $300,000 of revenue. So the net benefit to our general fund is $247,820.
We'll take that anytime.
Yeah, that's a good one. We like to see that going on. The next 2 items are in our capital related items, and it's related to our unfinished capital projects from the prior year. So we go through, we do our budget versus actual, we see what remains, both in the expense and in the revenue categories. And so we have $6,702 of remaining capital expenditures, mainly roads that we have that we're rebudgeting there. But it also includes some Bonneville Shoreline Trail and other items that are involved in that. And then $2,482,000 of total grant coming through that. Excuse me. So a net of $4,220 in our capital projects fund. And then in our stormwater fund, we had no revenues, but $932,000 of unfinished capital projects there that we're carrying those funds forward. And those are pretty standard. We do that every year based on our analysis of what we were able to complete. Oftentimes, they're just not able to complete things by June. A lot of things tend to finish more towards this time of year, the October, November kind of time frame as we end the construction.
Wouldn't that
season.
come with the revenue then, if we're carrying over the revenue?
What we're doing is in our fund balance, in essence, built, and then we're using that money that built in our fund balance to pay for it. So it's not costing us any additional money. We've already pre-funded it by funding it in the fund. So the fund balance just grows, because say we put $1 million in to do a capital project, we only spent 200,000. So at the end of the year, our fund balance grows by 800,000. We're just spending that 800,000 that we plan to spend now. So that's kind of what happens.
So I just want to make sure, you mentioned in the rebudgeting here that this was largely unfinished capital projects that were transportation projects.
Many of them, not all. But
And
yeah.
is this the rebuilding, reconstruction of certain roadways or?
It's some striping projects that weren't finished by, remember, this is the end of June, so it's some striping that we didn't finish by then. It's some resurfacing that didn't finish by then, such as Fort Union didn't finish by June, and that was happening just before the school year started. It would be possibly some milling and other things that would happen. I don't know all the details of all the different projects that are going on, but it's a myriad of projects.
Just to clarify, it's just the gap from the fiscal year shifting over in the
Yeah.
projects. The project still occurred, we still expended funds. This is just from last year's budget to this year's budget to
Yeah.
cover those funds.
Yeah.
So we don't have another $4 million, I just want to clarify.
No, this is
I
just
wish we did.
This is just finishing what we've already funded that we weren't able to finish by the end of June.
By the end of June.
When we did that.
Okay.
So,
Questions, comments?
Well, thank you. So,
Thanks, Al. Okay, item B, zoning text amendment, Mike.
Thank you. This was a text amendment we brought forward to the planning commission to respond to a fairly common question we were getting in all sorts of development applications, mostly applications for, residential additions and small projects like that. I'll share the memo here, and this was sent to the council ahead of time. Right now, we have a provision in the ordinance, in the sensitive lands ordinance, that regulates the maximum amount of impervious surface. And you'll remember that sensitive lands in the city are like 8 different hazards identified as sensitive lands. When you look at the overlay map, about a third or more of the city is covered in some sort of sensitive lands area. Yet all those hazards are very different. Slope stability, you have rockfall hazard, debris flow, liquefaction, fault rupture hazards. Then you've got floodplain, groundwater, riparian areas. So a very diverse list of different hazards in the city. And yet we have this maximum impervious surface provision that states if you're anywhere in any sensitive land zone and you're doing any development activity, which can be building or retaining wall, is classified as development, the amount of impervious surface on your site cannot exceed 30% of the total site area. We got a lot of questions about this on, especially those small applications. Brand new development is not so much an issue because they're starting from scratch and are able to meet that standard. But we have some areas of the city that we inherited upon incorporation that, from the beginning of their permit process already exceeded that 30% impervious surface area. So what is probably the most common solution that we've seen is if someone, say, wants to build an addition onto their home, but their impervious surface is already, before they start, at 40%, they're adding on to that. There's a surplus there of 15%. And we just say, hey, you have to get to 30. We've seen people replace driveways with pervious pavers, walkways, things like that, that are, in staff's findings, fairly outside the scope of the actual development project at hand. All because of this provision. This provision is in here, to mitigate geologic hazards. So we were very cautious on reviewing this, but it happened enough, it came up enough, where we sat down with the DRC staff and said, hey, what do we think the real purpose of this provision is? And that's where the red line recommendations come from. Impervious surface can direct water discharge, and that is most, dangerous or hazardous to an area that has a slope stability hazard. If you're discharging water onto a steep slope area, that can create slope stability integrity issues and cause erosion and landslide activity and that kind of thing. So our recommendation here was to limit this impervious surface provision, at least this general one, to be applied in areas that have a slope stability hazard. So we are mitigating that particular hazard because that's the most direct impact that directed water runoff can have on the various hazards in our city. And then we've included a recommendation that in those areas, if proposed impervious surface exceeds 30%, the applicant is responsible to retain that excess runoff on site in an approved drainage plan that would be sent to the city engineer, stormwater manager, to make sure it's built to the right capacity, it's staying away from the hillside, it's doing those things. This does not preempt or preclude specific hazard studies from addressing impervious surface in their hazard mitigation plans. A few things that came up at Planning Commission. The riparian hazard that is in the ordinance includes a different hazard zones, but that closest zone to riparian areas, to top of banks, does not allow impervious surface within that top of bank area. In residential areas, it's 20 feet. In commercial areas, it's greater than that. And that's unchanged. That would still apply. In areas where we may see a high groundwater or floodplain hazard, a floodplain study, a groundwater analysis may include recommendations to reduce the amount of impervious surface on site to assist in how groundwater discharge is happening. That would still apply. They would still need to follow those recommendations. This amendment is meant for those general cases where they're just caught in an overlay zone of the sensitive lands hazard, and the requirement to reduce a bunch of impervious surface doesn't quite line up with the scope of the work that's being proposed.
The purpose. Yeah.
So that's the purpose of this. We did an analysis to say, hey, is 30% even the right number? We used the stormwater billing data, which went through lot by lot in the city when it was established, and assessed the amount of impervious surface, because the stormwater billing corresponds to impervious surface. Citywide, the average, when you take out outliers of hillside properties that are all undeveloped mountain, 30% is about the average of impervious surface. So we felt okay leaving that 30% in there. So that's the purpose of this. It's just meant to be a more directed requirement to actually mitigate and address the potential hazard or the potential harm that we think it would cause.
What do you need from us? Just
This went through Planning Commission. They recommended approval, so now it comes to the city council. It's just on work session tonight, and then it'll be
Move
scheduled
forward
at a
to it.
follow-up meeting.
May I make a
for action.
comment, please?
So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm wondering where one can see the DRC minutes from the DRC meeting in which this was discussed.
This was just a discussion with the staff members that are on the DRC.
Right, and according to our ordinance, the DRC is to keep meeting minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't an official DRC meeting. This was just discussion with the city engineer.
Well, I
with the
know, but
planning
all
department.
DRC meetings are official. They're in our ordinance.
So then I'll say it this way. This was a conversation with the city engineer, the public works department. and
So
the
may
planning
I
department.
see the elements of that DRC meeting, whatever record you have of that?
I will reiterate, it was not a DRC meeting. It was a staff
I
discussion.
believe it says right here that it was within the DRC.
So the minutes for a DRC meeting were meant for when somebody comes in.
That's for pre-scoping
It's
meetings.
when
On a
it's when the
pre-scoping and
DRC
those type of things.
convenes.
It's when they hold pre-scoping meetings.
No, it's when the DRC convene. I'll have to check that, but I think
he's
it's
saying
when
they
the-
didn't convene.
The DRC staff met as city staff, not in a formal DRC meeting, but they are referenced as the DRC staff. But if you'd like me to change the memo to say we talked with the city engineer, the public works department, the planning department, and
Well, it's
other
only the
staff members,
DRC
we
if
can do that.
if the members of the DRC are present. So there's that concern I have. I also have a concern that historically, with the 100-year flood models that have been the standard, we're coming into times that with climate change, where the retention of water and some of the models that were used again historically, may not be robust enough. And so a concern that I would like the council to consider is with this, again, current rate of climate change, is this is the standard of allowing for more impervious surface going to impact our already challenges with our storm drains? Are the catchment facilities that would be required, will they be adequate? Should we have more extreme weather conditions where we get were more prone to flooding and much more extreme weather patterns than we had, you know, historically. And I'm just curious, how have those elements been considered either at the planning commission level or those specific concerns?
Sure, fair question. What I would suggest, if that's the intention of a policy, would be to apply that in a more citywide basis, because that is a holistic issue with the city. Right now, this provision broadly kind of singles out any area that just happens to have a sensitive lands overlay. If you're across the street from that, you can build, you know, however much impervious surface you want. So I would suggest if the council wants to go that direction, it's slightly different than this current provision, which is a tool to mitigate a hazard risk, and apply that in a more citywide fashion.
Because certainly we'd want to have fairness and equal applicability for our residents. And so I can understand how this was a concern brought to staff, and I appreciate that staff is being responsive, again, trying to give fairness and equal applicability to our residents. You know, again, based on what we've seen in recent times with, you know, storm drains, we just had Laura Briefer here talking about how soil moisture levels are declining in the state of Utah. I think it would be incumbent upon the council to think about this as our economic development director is suggesting on a holistic basis for our city.
So I wanted to say one thing. I just want to give major props for the city staff looking at an ordinance that the city has, asking the question of what is the purpose of this ordinance, and making sure that the actual applicability and practice of this ordinance that's put in place meets what the whole purpose is. And if there are those areas that go outside the bounds of, hey, we're wanting to make sure that there are not landslides or the things that you've mentioned. And if there are areas that we put restrictions on that they don't have those concerns, we absolutely should change what those rules are. And so making sure that that government, like you said, Councilmember Burrell, is even-handed and level with people and not overburdened somewhere it doesn't make sense is a great move. So
Yeah, I'm
thanks.
in favor of moving forward with the text amendment.
I have one question.
Okay.
Please. You took out the sentence, areas of roofs and private driveways will be estimated, including the total impervious surface area. Why was that removed?
Because when we make this, that's an old sentence that was in there, and I don't know why it was in there, because anytime we see a development application that triggers this, we're not estimating those areas. We are asking, we're saying, show your roof, show your driveway. So it's not an estimate. It's, hey, show your whole lot and all the impervious surface on your plan.
Which it would include roofs and driveways. So
Yeah,
you just
it already
was a-
includes it. It's just
it
kind
wasn't
of,
unnecessary.
we don't need to estimate
Not-
it.
we're
'cause
not gonna not
We have it
consider it.
exact.
It's not an estimate. Give us your actual plan.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That makes sense to me. I would support it.
Okay, so we've got. just
So
go
we'll,
forward with
if it's
the-
okay, we'll
Yep.
put this on for action at the next
Yep.
meeting.
Okay, thank you. Item C, so I think we have the best arts council chair in the state of Utah. So, and she is here
Jealous that
today.
Sean's on that committee.
Cry, baby, cry.
Because those utility boxes are looking pretty good.
Coming along,
And
right?
she is here with us today, and seriously, and her along with Annette, Jill and everything, I mean, honestly, we're grateful for all that you do, so.
Thank you.
Glad to have
Putting
you
me in
here.
today on
Yeah.
the very busy meeting, so I'll be
Yeah.
quick, but thank
okay.
you for all of that. And likewise, we are extremely grateful for the mayor and the council's support all the time for the Arts Council. We feel it and we're very grateful. Am I gonna be in control of this? Okay, I'm gonna zoom through here. We have currently 8 Arts Council members, always looking for more. So if you guys know people in your area that are interested, it's a really fun group. These are the members, and I had to include at the bottom that we have the support of Ann, Kate, and Councilman Sean Newell, which we're very grateful for. One of our big events, or I guess you can call it an event, that we do that you guys probably see all the time is here in the city building, the Artist of the Month. We try to make sure that we always are providing a free show for the public, and to keep it diverse. We've had traveling museums, the Chinese New Year, and then just a variety of different mediums and artists. And we always have people emailing us asking to be an artist of the month. So it's really fun. It's catching on. Our summer musical, I know that Anne already gave you guys, a wrap up information and data about that. So I'll pass through, but it was a really successful summer musical this year. Other events, basically we try to do a good balance of traditions mixed with new events based on like the current council members' talents and interests and the community's current interests. So we have painting in the park and chalk art at Butlerville Days. Those are things that the community has had and looks forward to every year. And then we have some newer ones, the Sweetheart Paint Night and Chinese New Year, that are also becoming Cottonwood Heights traditions. We're doing both of those again next year. And then some other new events that we did this year is the Hello Ink that's going on right now. It's the month of October. It's an online ink drawing not competition, just an event that's just available to anyone who's online and is interested. We have a free Christmas concert coming up and an art show that we are trying to break away from just having it be about Christmas and just trying to include all kind of winter celebrations and cultural traditions. We like to make a presence at some city events like Monster Mash and Light the Heist, just to keep people aware of the Arts Council. And then we have musical auditions every year. And then Matt mentioned the public art projects, that the electrical boxes are getting a lot of attention, and we are really thrilled with how they turned out. We want to not just invite the public to come see events that we put on, but we want to bring art into the community, into everyone's everyday activities, and wrapping the boxes on Bengal Boulevard was perfect.
Are the artists in the city?
All of them except for one.
Wow.
And it turns out that that one still had a connection with the city, but he's not a current resident anymore.
And they donate their time and
They did it totally free. Yeah, they did. And then that one box there at the Shell station, you can see when we put it in, it was encased in weeds. And so the before and after pictures of this are really spectacular. The 9/11 National Day of Service group led by Randy Whitehead and Jerry Christensen helped us clean that up, and it turned out really great. I noticed that the Shell station is changing their sign too. I think it just kind of encouraged them to beautify the area even more. And then I just wanted to kind of show you some of the artists. We just tried to look for a variety of art styles and try to also incorporate Cottonwood Heights in all of them. So they're all different and they all turned out really fun. And all the artists are so proud. Most of them went and took pictures by them, and it's been really fun.
I had a thought. Do they put some coating on them to protect the paint? I've always wondered how long it's gonna last.
So these ones are actually wrapped.
It's a wrap.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Like
what I
you
was
would wrap a
wondering.
They
Advertisement,
last 2 to 3 years is what I've
Okay.
heard. Holiday, we use the same company that Holiday used, and theirs are still pretty nice after 3 years. So, but I think we're gonna probably just change them out after 3 years. If I guess the next council wants to do that, but yeah, and then it was really fun because all of these people plus Savannah at the Shell station are all Brighton High alumni.
Cool.
So, and then that one that Jerry did has a QR code, and you can it links to a whole bunch of historical information about Brighton High School. And then the other public art that we did this year was the Mount View wall. It was just noticeably like in decline from its original, was that one up in the left corner. And this is what it looked like before we refinished it. And that one is paint, and it does have a coating on it. So if it gets like graffitied or something, they can come and clean it off. Yeah. And it should last also, we're hoping 3 years at least.
And is Whitney
She
local as well?
she owns the Smartest Artist up by Smith's. She's an art teacher for mostly kids. And she does a lot, she volunteers a lot of time for, with our Arts Council to do a lot of events, but this one was really spectacular. Draper Fabrication is not Cottonwood Heights, but they're a local company that helped, because she's not a mural artist per se, and so getting her design onto a mural, they came and helped her paint it, so. But that was, I think, such a huge impact, such a big change, so that was really fun. Some of our goals moving forward are to continue to bring art to the community with more public art projects, like hopefully more electrical box wrappings in the future, providing hands-on art experiences, creating meaningful and enjoyable art opportunities, a variety. We're trying to reach out to everyone if they're beginners or artists, and giving the community free and low-cost events to attend, and then continuing to collaborate with other Cottonwood Heights organizations and committees like we did with this Mount View mural with PTOS. So that worked out really well, and it benefited both of the organizations. So we were thrilled with that, so. Okay, thank you so much.
You are,
again for
hey,
your
so
support.
I would love to, one of the things that's been on my mind a lot, Matt, is the roundabout. And I don't know whether we could get people that would be willing to do something, or if we could even put some money towards it, but I think something artistic in that roundabout.
You want a well.
No, I don't want to. But, you know.
We wanted to leave originally there, and we were told that there were some restrictions with visibility because it's used as a crosswalk, but I think that we could probably work with it based on the height and stuff.
Well, maybe Matt and I will have a conversation and make sure that, because I would love it.
Oh, I would too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a perfect location, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Appreciate this. Yeah, thank you.
I'll
Okay.
mention also that Whitney is the one doing our Halloween as well.
Yeah.
So she's doing them. She does a lot of nice projects for us.
So Scott, I've got 5 minutes for a fraud risk assessment overview. You got 2?
Yeah,
Can you do it in
if I can
2?
find the right one, sorry, we can get through.
We saw it, we reviewed it, right? We did.
We did.
I'll have to switch over. Okay. So the fraud risk assessment is an assessment that's required for us to do as part of our financial review and our audit every year. So this one is for the past year that we're closing, the fiscal year 2024, and we go through and we evaluate everything, and we get points for doing different things that we do on that. The one area where we year after year don't get full points is on number 8. Does the entity have a formal internal audit function? And we do not, because we don't have a formal internal auditor hired. For a city of our size, it would be astronomically expensive to do that. So we just handle it on an as needed basis, whether me or any of my staff or the city manager or the department directors see a need, any of us are able to go and do an audit function that may need to be taken care of and reviewed. There are some policies that we need to have in place, and we do have those policies. Do we have, a licensed CPA or CIA, which doesn't mean you're a spy, certified internal auditor is what that is. But we do have both of those. I'm a CPA, Dave is a certified internal auditor. Other things like that. And anyhow, we comply in all these areas, and we only miss out on points on the one area. And then there's a list of areas here talking about separation of duties. And the only one that we don't have full separation of duties is when we collect cash or payments. And the reason for that is because we don't always have a ton of staff on hand at all times. So we have some mitigating duty. I don't remember what C stands for now, but anyhow, we have some mitigating circumstances in place so that we can make sure that we're not having any issues with collecting and checks and depositing them and so on and so forth. But we're in good shape. I don't have anything that concerns me. When our external auditors come in, they don't have any concerns that they express back to us. And then when they do come, when we present the financial statements to you in December, you're welcome to ask them questions. If you have any questions related to either internal audit or the financial statements or any of those things. as well, but at any time, you're welcome to ask me questions related to any of those things. That's kind of about all I have.
Okay, awesome. And the audit will be December, you said, right?
Yes.
That's when he'll come present after. Okay,
Yep.
awesome. Okay, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Thanks for being quick too. So,
Can I do it in 5?
yeah, if
Maybe.
you can, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm gonna turn it down to Suzanne for a short-term rental enforcement
So you can
discussion.
pass it down. Make there's enough.
98.
This is simply an attempt to try to pull together a process for us to get short-term rental policy. Control updated, however you want to say it. We've had Galen Benyon come to the council. We had a presentation by Mike Johnson. We've had so many citizens who have said, please help us. We've got to get this under control. And so I've talked with all of you, so I'm just going to go through 4 points pretty quickly. The first is to make immediate progress. We had Chief Russo talk to us at a council meeting and said, you've got to increase the fine because it's really not worth our time, effort, and energy right now to build a case when it's only $100 per day compliance, problem, and they're making $1,200 a night. So the town of Brighton is $650 per day. I'd suggest that we implement that, and I think I got a some consensus from most of you for that. The second, which we're not going to be able to do tonight, but which I think is going to guide some of the next steps here, is it's been recommended by multiple publications that I've read, is that you really should have your council objectives before you set your short-term rental policies. What I put in front of you is from a white paper from Granicus, and I'm happy to send that out to all of you, but essentially it says, okay, council, come together, identify who you are, and if you'll turn to the second page of what I've given you, start with explicit policy objectives. Now go to the third page. And it gives examples. For example, you're trying to establish short-term rental policy objectives for an affluent residential community in an attractive location? That's pretty close to what we are. So it gives some ideas there. And then the next page is example B, and it says, how about short-term rental policy objectives for an urban community with a shortage of affordable housing? That applies to us. And so not at this meeting, but I would suggest at another that we come together as a council and establish objectives that should guide our short-term rental policy. Sandy City's revising theirs, Brighton did theirs 3 years ago. We have a lot of examples and just don't want what the next step I'm going to tell you to be working in a vacuum. And the next step is I recommend we put together a small subcommittee that can really study this, dive into the details, and come back to the council with some recommendations. And my recommendation is that that small subcommittee be a council member, one person from the planning commission who has studied this or has some knowledge or has some interest. The third would be staff from community and economic development, because you've studied it, you go to meetings, you have a lot to say. And then the fourth would be code enforcement that we have their input as well.
Planning, somebody was planning or no?
Yeah, that was the second one,
Oh,
council
you said that
planning,
already.
and then staff from community economic development, and then code enforcement, because they're the ones who build the cases, chief. And so that was my thought behind making that recommendation. But before that committee, or alongside that committee, we need to have a follow-up discussion in a work session about establishing our objectives. And so far, I think all of you have kind of agreed that we need to get a subcommittee. And the reason we wanted to cram this into this work session is ski season is right upon us. And there's a lot of chatter right now about what's going to happen in the legislative session. So to postpone this any further would not have been in our best interest. So thank you for talking about it tonight. And then the fourth was just a general concern that here I'm talking to Kirk Cullimore, who's our senator here on the South, that represents some of our, including me in Cottonwood Heights, and Greg Curtis, who didn't even know what the Notwell rule was. And that's one of the big obstacles we have. And so to make an effort by the city to educate our lobbyists on how much we're being impacted. If we actually have 400 short-term rentals that are not registered and not in compliance in our city, and we have 9,900 residences, that's at what, 4%? I mean, just a rough estimate of our entire housing stock that's being taken up by short-term rentals. So we can't ignore it anymore. So I think in essence, I thank the mayor for putting this on the agenda. I think I have agreement from all of you for all of these things, and just want to then prep you with this Granicus white paper to come back and talk about this and what are our objectives in short-term rental policy.
I'll get it on
Is that 5 minutes?
Yeah, that was awesome. And we'll get that on. I think we're all in agreement.
Okay.
Forward with talking about our objectives.
Thank you. I will send out the Granicus paper to all of you. It's actually a really kind of quick, easy, good read. Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for your work on this.
And the last item for staff reports is November, December city council meeting schedule discussion. So Jared, you've got a couple things for November, right?
Real quick, so we also have a meeting on the 29th, which is a joint planning commission city council meeting on the 29th of this month. We moved the meeting on the 5th of November to the 12th of November. We have some items on that meeting. We do not have items on the 19th yet. However, we have to hold the 19th because that's when we'll have the final results of the votes. We need to canvass that.
29th of this month.
29th of this month is a joint planning commission city
That's at
council.
6 p.m.,
Starts at 5:30,
5:30.
and I'll send out another notice
5:30,
to whenever we're done.
okay.
Wherever you will be, we will come to
We'll
you.
come.
You going to Laguna?
No, this is a presentation I have to give.
And this is to discuss the form-based code and,
Yeah.
okay. But what I wanted to ask you about is November, since we canceled the 5th, or I didn't cancel, we moved it to the 12th. We have some items on the 12th. We have to meet on the 19th. We can move the items to the 12th if you'd rather not have two meetings in November to the 19th, but we have to hold the 19th to canvass the vote. So
Sorry,
I just
what's the
wanted to get
question?
feedback whether or not you still wanted to hold the 12th, or if you'd prefer just to have one meeting in November on the 19th. We will likely add more things as time goes,
So we
but
have to have the 19th, is what you're saying?
we won't have the results until the 19th.
Because I think a previous discussion, we said we really want to have the option to have two November
Yeah.
meetings because we may only have one in December. So when we have things like stuff that
Right.
We're gonna have two in December though.
we are gonna have two in December.
We will have both in December.
I would favor two meetings, shorter meetings.
Okay.
That's just one person's opinion.
I think, yeah, other thoughts?
Well, I know I have a couple of agenda items that I'm waiting for a response on, so I think we need two meetings in November.
Any thoughts, Matt?
I mean, how much in advance can you cancel if we don't have? Oh, I guess we wouldn't know because of the 12th.
Yeah, so we've got items for the 12th right now. All of those can be
Understood.
moved. However, if you want to hold two, we can divvy them up a little bit.
I don't have a strong opinion. I mean,
Okay.
it's whatever our load is. I'd be fine to do one, I'd be fine to do two.
So we'll move forward and do both meetings,
Okay.
yeah. And then we don't have any changes for December as of now, right?
Right.
So our two meetings in December are the 3rd and the 17th.
Right.
Got it.
Thank you.
And a review of calendars and upcoming events. The Arts Keller Halloween is going on, Monster Mash on the 25th, the Rec Center Trunk or Treat on the 31st. Sit here in the parking lot, November elections, early voting to October 9th, 29th to the 1st, and 2 p.m. from 7, and then election day from 7 a.m. to 8 all day long. City council meetings for November, just again, on the 12th and 19th will be held. Light the Heights on December 2nd, Arts Council Holiday Show on Friday the 6th. That's Butler Middle School. We should all encourage everybody to go to that. And then no closed session, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn our work session.
I'll second that.
All in